Chapter 261, Just Touched Something I Shouldn't Have. I stared in horror as the sounds of violent retching echoed from the kitchen. My already pale face stiffened instantly. Was my cooking really that bad? Inside the kitchen, Leo was hunched over the trash can, unable to control himself. Ugh! His voice was strained between heaves. What in the moon goddess's name is this stuff? Another violent retch followed. Ugh! I was completely speechless. My eyes darted toward Tristan and Malachi, who exchanged a meaningful look before silently turning away. They usually seemed quick to help Leo, but right now neither dared approach. It seemed like they'd arrived at exactly the wrong moment. I realized they must have grown too accustomed to barging in when Erik didn't have company around. From their expressions, it was clear they were thinking the same thing. They'd have to be more careful in the future about interrupting whatever Erik might be doing with the she-wolf. The thought made me cringe internally. My heart leaped into my throat as the retching continued relentlessly. I glanced nervously at Erik, then down at my own bowl, and finally at the untouched noodles Erik had pushed toward me earlier. I couldn't understand how Leo's stomach could be so weak. He'd only had one bite. Yet the sounds from the kitchen suggested he was emptying the contents of his entire digestive system. How many times had he vomited already? 5? 6? Swallowing hard, I set down my chopsticks and looked at Erik with the most pitiful expression I could muster. I'm full. Can I go upstairs first? Erik looked at me, his amber eyes narrowing slightly. I could feel tears forming in my eyes from sheer embarrassment and fear. What would he do now that my cooking had literally poisoned his pack member? Would he throw me out into the cold European winter? Erik's eyes narrowed further as he studied my face. I felt like a small rabbit under a predator's gaze. I sniffled pathetically, my nose probably turning red from the tears threatening to spill. "See, can I?" I asked again, gathering what little courage I had left. To my immense relief, Erik didn't make things difficult this time. He simply nodded with a brief, Go ahead." His expression remained unreadable, but at least he wasn't angry. I felt like I'd just received a presidential pardon. Without a second thought, I stood up and practically fled upstairs, the sounds of Leo's continued suffering fading behind me. My cheeks burned with humiliation. I'd never cook again in my life. The moment I closed the door to my room, I instinctively locked it. Then, with trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and called Scarlett. She was my only lifeline in this nightmare. If anyone could understand, it would be her. "Emma, don't worry, I'll be back tonight," Scarlett answered immediately. There shouldn't be any accidents this time. I could barely hold back the tears of relief. Scarlett, sob was all I could manage. The day's humiliation, mixed with my ongoing fear of Erik, overwhelmed me. Okay. I know you're scared." Scarlett's voice was gentle, patient. "When I get back, I'll keep you right beside me. Wherever I go, you'll go, all right?" Her promise made me feel marginally better. Maybe this nightmare would end soon. Maybe I could escape this terrifying Alpha and his unpredictable moods. "Be good, don't cry," she continued, her tone soothing. "But rest assured, Alpha Blackwood really won't do anything to you." "Really?" I asked tearfully, desperately wanting to believe her. After all I'd witnessed of Erik's cold, ruthless nature, I found it hard to trust he wouldn't harm me once his patience ran out. "Yes, really. No accidents. My flight is tonight. You'll see me tomorrow morning," Scarlett replied with confidence. I noticed she didn't add her usual "barring any unforeseen circumstances," a phrase that had begun to feel like a curse every time she said it. Something always went wrong when those words were spoken. "Okay, I'll wait for you. Please, really, no more accidents," I sniffled, wiping my tears with the sleeve of the oversized hoodie. The fabric smelled faintly of Erik, which only made me more anxious. "Okay, no more accidents," Scarlett agreed, and I found myself clinging to her words like a lifeline. Feeling slightly better, I added, "Okay, I'll wait. I'll come back early tomorrow. Just one more night. I could survive one more night, right?" "I will," Scarlett promised. "Come straight here when you land," I insisted, my voice growing firmer with desperation. "I don't want to stay here anymore. I never want to see him again." The thought of spending even one more day with Erik after this was unbearable. I paused at Emma's outburst. What trouble had she gotten into this time? Poor Emma sounded absolutely terrified. Yesterday, she'd accidentally fiddled with Erik's belt buckle, then pulled off his bath towel. What could possibly have happened now? Her tones screamed that something major had occurred. Could it be related to what I'd suggested last night? The physical cooling for Erik's silver-induced fever? "What did you do today?" I asked carefully. Then a thought struck me. "Wait, when you were giving Alpha Blackwood the physical cooling last night, don't tell me." I paused, clearing my throat awkwardly. "Don't tell me you stripped him naked and got caught?" What else could have scared her this badly? Emma wasn't usually this easily frightened, despite her recent jumpiness around Erik. Complete silence fell on Emma's end. Even her sniffling stopped. The sudden quiet was more telling than any words. "Is it true?" I gasped, genuinely shocked. It was supposed to be just physical cooling, right? A medical necessity for his silver fever. Even if Erik, being an alpha, didn't know better? Surely Emma did? But then again, this was Emma we were talking about. The same Emma who'd accidentally pulled off Erik's towel just yesterday. "Wait, then does that mean you saw?" If she'd stripped Erik completely. Oh dear, forget just scaring her. Erik might genuinely lose his temper over that. Alphas were notoriously private, especially powerful ones like Erik Blackwood. "Don't talk nonsense, I'm not that stupid," Emma finally replied, her voice still thick with tears, but now carrying a hint of indignation. I probed, sensing there was definitely more to this story. The way she hesitated told me everything. Emma hesitated before continuing. "I didn't finish stripping him. It's just, I didn't dare look, so while I was wiping him blind, I accidentally touched something I shouldn't have. Argh! Just stop asking about it." I felt my mouth twitch, fighting the urge to laugh despite the seriousness of the situation. The mental image was too ridiculous. Emma blindly feeling her way around Erik's body during what should have been a medical procedure. "Touch something you shouldn't have? Does Alpha Blackwood know?" I couldn't help asking, genuinely curious about Erik's reaction. "Didn't I say stop asking? Why are you so curious?" Emma exclaimed, clearly exasperated. Her embarrassment was practically radiating through the phone. Then she sighed heavily. "He grabbed my wrist right then. What do you think?" Now it was my turn to be petrified. I didn't need details to imagine how awkward that encounter must have been. The mental image of Emma accidentally touching Erik in that way while blindly attempting to cool him down was almost too much. No wonder she was traumatized. "So Alpha Blackwood got angry?" I asked, trying to understand why she was still so frightened. Erik's temper was legendary, but usually controlled. "He wasn't angry about that," Emma clarified, surprising me. That caught me off guard. "Not angry about that? Then why did he scare you?" Even I, usually uninterested in gossip, was intrigued now. This didn't fit with what I knew about Erik at all. Most alphas would be furious at such an invasion of privacy. "Isn't Alpha Blackwood, having issues? Alphas are most insecure about that. You touched him there and he didn't get angry?" Just as I finished my question, I heard my bedroom door push open. The soft creak made me turn around, and there stood Roman in the doorway, his expression darkening as he caught the tail end of my conversation. A sudden headache blossomed behind my eyes as I realized what he'd just overheard. This mouth of mine had once again landed me in trouble. Chapter 262, He Might Really Be Incapable. I nervously paced around my room in Erik's villa, one hand clutching my phone like a lifeline. The events from last night kept replaying in my mind, making my cheek burn with embarrassment. Finally, I gathered my courage and called Scarlett again. Before speaking, I methodically checked that the bedroom door was locked, even trying the handle twice to be absolutely certain. The last thing I needed was Erik suddenly appearing while I was having this conversation. "Hey, let me tell you," I whispered into the phone, lowering my voice to a barely audible level. "He might really be incapable." "Elaborate," Scarlett prompted, her interest clearly piqued. I hesitated, my throat suddenly dry. This was territory I'd never expected to discuss about anyone, let alone an intimidating alpha like Erik Blackwood. But after last night's incident, I couldn't keep it to myself. It's just that. I cleared my throat twice, trying to find the least explicit way to describe what happened. Last night, I wiped him down for so long, and he had no reaction at all. "Then he's definitely incapable," Scarlett concluded immediately. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Despite his powerful physique and intimidating presence, there had been absolutely no physical response from Erik during the cooling process. None whatsoever, even when I accidentally touched. Well, there. "So what exactly did you do today to provoke him?" Scarlett asked, changing the subject. Before I could answer, she suddenly gasped. "Wait, how many doses of fever-reducing herbs did you give Erik last night?" The panic in her voice made me pause. "I only gave him 1 dose. When you said that, I figured you were talking in your sleep." That's good," she sighed with obvious relief. I rolled my eyes. "I'm not that stupid." So did she really think I would mindlessly follow advice about giving multiple doses of potent herbs to someone with a silver wound? Even with my limited medical knowledge, I knew that could be fatal. "Then why did you provoke Erik again?" Scarlett asked, sounding genuinely confused. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "Didn't he fire the pack cook? He asked me to cook instead." "But you don't know how," Scarlett pointed out bluntly. "Exactly, I don't know how, but he insisted," I explained, frustrated. "So I thought I'd make some noodles." "Okay, you know how to do that," Scarlett said, though her tone suggested limited confidence in my abilities. "I do," I admitted, "but I don't know what went wrong today. I failed twice making noodles." "Huh? Failed?" Scarlett sounded genuinely shocked. I cringed at the memory. "The first time I burned them." Silence stretched across the line. Even I recognized the absurdity of burning something boiled in water. "The second time," I continued reluctantly, "it turned into a paste, like a dough cake." Scarlett groaned. "Even worse, I might have added salt twice." My voice grew smaller with each confession. "Wouldn't that be incredibly salty?" Scarlett exclaimed. "You bet that Leo Vance tasted it and spat it out immediately, like I'd poisoned him," I explained, remembering the Omega's violent reaction. The humiliation still stung. "So Erik got angry at you?" Scarlett asked. I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. "He wasn't angry at me. Then. I was scared." I burst out, my voice cracking slightly. "You should have seen the way he looked at Leo. That kind of alpha who could just neutralize someone. Wouldn't I worry he might lash out at me in a fit of rage?" I remembered those cold amber eyes, that imposing presence that seemed to fill the entire room. If he could be so merciless to his own pack member for a simple comment, what might he do to me, a stranger under his protection? Okay, Scarlett soothed patiently. "My flight is tonight. Don't be scared, Emma." I sniffled, fighting back tears. "Don't you dare lie to me." "Okay, I won't lie," she promised. After several more minutes of reassurance from Scarlett, I finally felt calm enough to end the call. But the moment I hung up, the silence of the room closed in around me, and the fear crept back. Nothing in my sheltered life had prepared me for this world of dangerous alphas, silver bullets, and life-threatening situations. I curled up on the bed, hugging my knees to my chest, counting the hours until Scarlett would arrive. Scarlett's POV. I barely had time to put my phone down when I sensed a familiar presence behind me. I jumped, startled, and turned to find Roman standing just inches away, his deep blue eyes watching me intently. "Roman, you scared me to death," I exclaimed, placing a hand over my racing heart. His lips curved into a knowing smile. "Bad-mouthing Erik again?" My face flushed hot with embarrassment. When had he entered? How much had he heard? I quickly decided changing the subject was my safest option. "Has Nathan Blake left?" I asked. Roman nodded. I studied his face, trying to read his expression. "Is something wrong with the Quinn family?" Given Nathan's urgent concerns about Jessica Miller's involvement with the Ayla Quinn incident, I suspected there might be more to the story than a simple mall altercation. "Don't concern yourself with these matters," Roman replied, his tone making it clear the subject was closed. His dismissal only confirmed my suspicion that something significant was happening with the Quinn family. I frowned slightly, feeling compelled to set the record straight. "Jessica didn't clash with me that day. Don't randomly implicate people," I said firmly. Roman raised an eyebrow. "She was even holding Ayla Quinn, helping to break up the fight," I continued. Though privately, I recalled that Jessica's help had effectively turned the situation into Ayla being beaten unilaterally. Just as I opened my mouth to elaborate further on the Ayla Quinn situation, Roman's phone rang. He leaned down and placed a quick kiss on my cheek before stepping away to answer it. I watched him walk away, his powerful presence commanding the room even with his back turned to me. Before I could get lost in my thoughts, a pack servant approached me with a respectful bow. "Miss Winters, a Miss Ava Amber is here to see you." I paused, surprised. Ava Amber, Alexander's sister. Despite my issues with Alexander and most of the Amber family, I'd always respected Ava. She was decisive, capable, and incredibly intelligent. In fact, if it weren't for Alexander's interference in my life, I might have even become friends with Ava. I'd always thought that if she had been born male, Alexander likely wouldn't have stood a chance at inheriting the Amber Pack leadership. Though with the recent unsettling arrival of Ethan Amber, James Amber's illegitimate son, the Amber inheritance situation was probably already in complete disarray. "Show her to the tea room," I instructed after a moment of consideration. "Yes, miss." I quickly changed into more appropriate clothing before heading downstairs. When I entered the tea room, I found Ava examining one of the teacups with apparent interest. She stood out starkly from most she-wolves I knew. Her hair was cut short and neat, and she wore a sharp black blazer over a long skirt that gave her an air of authority and competence. She looked almost handsome, I realized. It wasn't a description I'd apply to many she-wolves, but it suited Ava perfectly. Sensing my presence, she looked up from the teacup, her gaze shifting to my face. She paused momentarily before offering a polite smile. "I didn't expect it would be so difficult to see you," she remarked, setting the cup down carefully. I settled onto the small sofa opposite her. "When did you get back?" I knew Ava managed significant portions of the Amber Pack's resource networks, which required extensive travel between territories. Her business acumen far surpassed Alexander's, something I'd always silently acknowledged. "Just arrived this morning," Ava replied, placing the teacup down with precision. I nodded, understanding the implication. Given the Amber family's recent troubles with the revelation of Ethan Amber's existence, the fact that Ava was only returning now spoke volumes about her workload and priorities. "I was supposed to come back when Mother fainted and was hospitalized," Ava explained, her composure never wavering. "But I got held up by pack business." I kept my expression neutral, though inwardly I noted this new information. Victoria Amber had been hospitalized? That must have been when Ethan Amber was sent to the Amber family by Darian Morrison. Darian had truly stirred up a hornet's nest by confirming Ethan was indeed James Amber's son. Ava looked directly at me, her gaze sharp and assessing. "My brother. He hasn't done anything to actually harm you over the years, has he?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Ava interlaced her fingers on the root-carved tea table, her posture shifting subtly into what I recognized as a negotiator's stance. "Does Sister Scarlet feel that the price the Amber family has paid for this is appropriate?" she asked carefully. I understood immediately what she was doing. Aside from paused collaborations with Roman, the Amber family, much like the Winter Pack, was facing systematic obstructions on multiple fronts lately. Ava was here to assess if I was behind it, or if I could make it stop. "Did you speak with your brother before coming here?" I asked, arching an eyebrow. Ava frowned, her eyes deepening as she studied me intently. I chuckled lightly, deciding to be direct. "As for why the Amber family is paying such a price, you should ask him. Ask him what he did to me because of Grace Winter." I could see Ava was trying to paint her family as innocent victims caught in some unfair retribution. But with Alexander involved in pack leadership alongside his father, the pack's suffering was a direct consequence of his actions, making them far from innocent. Chapter 263, Old Debts. I watched as Ava Amber's brow furrowed tightly, her expression suddenly taut with unease. She'd been abroad for years, managing pack resources, somewhat disconnected from her family's recent affairs. But my tone clearly rattled her. "I've been away," she admitted, her voice softer now. I knew Alexander had complicated feelings regarding Grace Winter, but her voice trailed off. I could see her mentally piecing together fragments from scattered pack reports, trying to understand what had truly happened. One fact seemed to have crystallized in her mind. Grace Winter had orchestrated an attack that nearly killed me. Ava took a deep breath, composing herself. "Grace Winter was raised by the Winter Pack. The grudge between you and her is the Winter Pack's business, isn't it?" I understood her perspective. Pack matters should ideally remain private, settled within the pack, without dragging others into the fray. It is the Winter Pack's business, yes, I agreed quietly, before my voice hardened. But Alexander Amber has been suppressing this whole thing, suppressing all the evidence of Grace's involvement. He chose to get involved himself. So, Miss Amber, do you think he's really innocent in this? The memories flooded back unbidden. The violent rogue wolf attack on the road that night. The realization later that Grace Winter was behind it all. My furious resolve to hold her accountable. I'd even found solid evidence of her involvement. Yet all the powers at play, wolves aligned with the Winter Pack and Alexander himself, took deliberate steps to bury the truth. They wanted to protect Grace at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing me. Your brother wasn't merely a bystander, I continued, my voice cold and sharp. He actively participated in the cover-up. Ava's eyes widened slightly. Cover-up? I nodded grimly. And later, when I refused to let it go, things escalated. Daniel Winter hired someone to eliminate me. Eliminate you? Ava repeated, clearly shocked. You should ask him who Kane is. At the mention of that name, Ava's breath caught. Kane was notorious in certain circles, a feared rogue wolf enforcer whose trail often went cold. So you're saying Alexander hired Kane to kill you? Ava's voice dropped to a whisper. How did you survive? A bitter, knowing smile curved my lips. Want to know why I'm alive? Because I grew up in the Thorn Pack. I didn't elaborate further, but the implication was clear. My connection to the Thorn Pack, whether recognized through scent or old pack ties, likely made Kane hesitate. The same enforcer sent to kill me might have instead warned me or simply chosen not to fulfill the contract. The resentment I'd been holding burned in my heart. Want to know why I'm so ruthless toward the Winter Pack, toward Alexander Amber? Then look at what they once did to me. For all the chaos Daniel Winter now faced, frantically seeking me out to leverage our blood ties, it felt hollow. Too little, too late. Alexander never mentioned any of this, Ava said quietly, her knuckles white where she gripped the armrest of her chair. Would you have expected him to? I countered. She tried to frame Alexander as innocent in the pack's current misfortunes, but the truth was far messier than her familial loyalty could fix. Her brother had chosen his side long ago, and it wasn't mine. Suddenly, Ava's carefully maintained composure cracked. Her voice trembled with unexpected fury. Alexander, that bastard, how could he do this to you? Her reaction caught me off guard. She'd come seeking reconciliation, perhaps even trying to protect her family's interests. But now she stood abruptly, face flushing with rage. I'm going back to rip his head off myself. Before I could respond, she stormed out of the tea room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Her swift shift from composed negotiator to enraged sister was startling, but somehow fit the fiery temperament I'd glimpsed beneath her polished exterior. Left alone, I merely shrugged. Let chaos reign within the Amber Pack. Perhaps only in sufficient turmoil would old debts finally be settled. The tea room fell quiet. A pack servant entered silently to collect Ava's abandoned teacup, thus sliding a respectful glance my way before retreating. I rose and left the tea room, only to be met by Wilson in the hallway. Miss Winters, he bowed slightly. Is there anything you need to bring back to the Eastern Territories? I shook my head. There was nothing from the Northern Territories I wished to take with me. My memories here were all tinged with bitterness, and I yearned to return with a clean slate. No, nothing, I replied. Wilson nodded, accepting my answer without comment. Alpha Thorn is in the study with Healer Walsh and Beta Stone, he informed me. I nodded, suddenly feeling weary from the confrontation with Ava. Though it was still afternoon, I decided to rest before our overnight flight back to the Eastern Territories. As I turned toward the stairs, I saw Roman emerging from the study with Aiden Walsh and Hunter Stone. Their conversation paused when they spotted me. Roman turned to Aiden. Check on Scarlet. Her appetite's been poor these past few days. The concern in his voice warmed something deep in my chest, even as I felt slightly embarrassed by his attention to such a minor issue. I'm fine, I protested mildly. Roman's blue eyes fixed on me, his expression softening just slightly. No sudden changes to tonight's flight. We'll leave as planned. Relief coursed through me. I needed to return to the Eastern Territories quickly to ensure Emma's safety. The poor girl sounded increasingly distressed with each call. promise?" I asked, needing the reassurance. "Barring any emergencies," he answered, his voice firm. "Everything is arranged." I watched silently as he and Hunter took their leave, still discussing pack matters. The weight of leadership never seemed to leave his shoulders. Aiden's POV. I waited until Roman and Hunter were gone before turning to Scarlett. Her emerald eyes held a question. "Vincent Gray," she said simply. "Is there any update?" I knew she was asking about the rogue Alpha who had been hunting her, the brother of Lucas Gray, who orchestrated the baby switch that altered both her life and Grace Winters. "There's no such wolf as Vincent Gray anymore," I replied, my voice deliberately even. I watched understanding dawn in her eyes. Roman's shadow organization operated with ruthless efficiency when it came to eliminating threats to those under his protection, particularly threats to Scarlett. My gaze lingered on her. Something had been bothering me since we arrived in the Northern Territories. Her recent lack of appetite was unusual, yes, but combined with her excellent sleep patterns. "You've been sleeping better?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Scarlett nodded. "Like a rock. It's strange. I haven't even had my usual midnight cravings." My mind began cataloging symptoms, running through possibilities. Nothing serious, I reassured myself. Probably just the stress of returning to her birthplace after so long. "Is something wrong with me?" she asked, catching my thoughtful expression. I shook my head quickly. "No, nothing serious. Your body's likely just adjusting to the northern climate. I'll prepare a strengthening tonic for you before we leave." "The same one Roman made me take after I was injured?" She grimaced slightly at the memory. I smiled. "The very same. It will help restore your energy for the journey back." She nodded, clearly ready to retire to her room. As she turned to head upstairs, I couldn't help adding, "Though your improved sleep is interesting, usually that's a good sign." Scarlett paused, giving me a curious look. "A good sign of what?" I shrugged noncommittally. "Just general health. Rest well, Scarlett. I'll have the tonic ready before departure." She nodded and continued up the stairs, but I could tell my comment had unsettled her slightly. Still, for now, she deserved this rare moment of peace, this chance to rest without the constant threats that had haunted her every waking moment. I watched her disappear down the hallway, my mind still turning over her symptoms. Could it be? No, too early to tell. Better to keep my suspicions to myself for now. Chapter 264, Fatigue and Fear. I stared at the ceiling of my bedroom at Shadow Valley, feeling an unusual heaviness in my limbs. This wasn't normal. Just weeks ago, I could power through entire days without rest, managing pack affairs, healing duties, and whatever crisis arose with barely a yawn. Now, I could barely keep my eyes open past lunch. "I'm not feeling well," I admitted to Aiden Walsh, who sat beside my bed with his healer's kit open. "I always have these dreams, and every time I wake up, I'm utterly spent." The dreams were always the same, nightmares filled with snakes and slithering creatures winding their way around my ankles, my wrists, my neck. Even now, fully awake, the memory sent chills through me. "Tell me more about these dreams," Aiden prompted, his voice professional though concern flickered in his eyes. "They're just nightmares. Snakes, mostly." I shuddered. They feel so real. I wake up exhausted, like I haven't slept at all. Aiden's fingers stilled in their task of mixing herbs. "So you're having a lot of dreams? I'll add another herb to your tonic." I just nodded, too tired to protest. What was happening to me? Between morning naps, afternoon collapses, and nighttime sleep, I was spending more hours unconscious than awake. Yet I never felt rested. "This should help with the dreams," Aiden continued, adding a pinch of something purple to the mixture. "Though we need to address your lack of appetite, too." "Fine," I agreed weakly. "So officially I have insomnia, excessive dreaming, and poor appetite?" "Seems that way," Aiden confirmed, his tone too carefully neutral for my liking. After Aiden took his leave, promising to return with the completed tonic before our flight, I sank back against the pillows. The room felt unnaturally warm, then suddenly cold. I needed to rest before the journey tonight. Just as my eyes began to drift closed, my phone rang. I reached for it blindly, squinting at the screen. Hazel's number. "Hazel?" I answered, stifling a yawn. The sound that came through made my blood freeze. Scarlett." Her voice was weak, barely audible above a background of chaos. I sat bolt upright, all traces of fatigue vanishing instantly. "What's wrong?" Where are you? What happened? There was no clear answer, just garbled noise and what sounded like metal scraping against metal. Then faintly, "Scarlett, help!" The call cut off. "Hazel?" I shouted into the dead line. "Hazel!" Panic surged through me. Something was terribly wrong. I leapt from the bed, my legs unsteady but propelled by adrenaline. Still clutching my phone, I dashed downstairs, repeatedly redialing Hazel's number as I moved. "Answer, please answer," I muttered, but each call went straight to voicemail. I was halfway to the front door when Wilson, the pack housekeeper, stepped in my path. "Miss Winters," he began, his face grave. "Move," I demanded. "I need to find Hazel. She's in trouble." Wilson's expression remained solemn. "Miss Walsh has been in a major car accident, miss." The world seemed to stop. I stared at him, uncomprehending. "What?" My voice came out as a whisper. "The driver who went to pick her up called in. Both he and Miss Walsh have been injured. She lost consciousness." My heart hammered painfully in my chest. "How badly? Where is she now?" "Pack healers have already been dispatched. They're taking her to the nearest healing den," Wilson explained, but his words did little to calm me. "I'll go see for myself," I declared, pushing past him toward the door. "Miss Winters, let me arrange a car for you." "No," I cut him off. "I'll drive myself. Just tell me where they are." Wilson seemed about to protest, but must have seen the determination in my eyes. "The accident happened near the North Ridge turnoff, about 20 minutes from here." I nodded sharply, grabbing my car keys from the entry table. I was still wearing only my thin indoor clothes, a light sweater and jeans, but I didn't care. "Miss Winters, at least take a coat," Wilson called after me, but I was already out the door, racing toward my car. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the driveway, my tires skidding slightly on the icy pavement. The clock on my dashboard read 4:27 p.m. The Northern Territory winter darkness was already creeping in, making visibility poor. I didn't care. My only thought was Hazel. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. When I finally spotted the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, my heart nearly stopped. The scene was chaos. Twisted metal, shattered glass, and the acrid smell of burned rubber permeated the air. I slammed on my brakes and leapt out of the car. Through the swarm of pack emergency responders, I caught sight of a familiar figure. Connor Reynolds, cradling a bloody, pale form in his arms. Hazel, her face was ghostly white, a stark contrast to the crimson staining her silver blonde hair. Connor was carrying her toward a waiting pack medical vehicle, his expression a mask of barely contained fury and fear. "Hazel!" I shouted, running toward them. But before I could reach them, Connor climbed into the vehicle with his precious cargo, and it sped away, sirens wailing. The last image I had was of Hazel's bloodless face against Connor's shoulder, her eyes closed, unmoving. I stood frozen, watching the taillights disappear around a bend. "Miss Winters?" I turned to find the Thornpack driver who'd been sent to pick up Hazel. His face was cut, and he limped badly, but he was conscious. "You were driving Hazel?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. He nodded grimly. "The car was stopped over there." He pointed to a small clearing beside the road, but as we pulled out, another vehicle suddenly lost control and came straight at us. I followed his gaze to the wreckage. Hazel's small car was crushed beyond recognition on the driver's side. Nearby, a large pickup truck lay overturned, its front end completely destroyed. But something wasn't right. I moved closer to inspect the damage, my eyes narrowing. The angle of impact, the skid marks on the road, the way the truck had hit exactly where the driver would sit. "This wasn't an accident," I whispered. The driver's silence was confirmation enough. Thornpack drivers underwent rigorous defensive driving training. They could evade most threats, anticipate dangers, react faster than ordinary wolves. For someone to successfully ram into one of our vehicles meant... It was deliberate, I said aloud, cold realization washing over me. "Someone targeted you." The driver nodded grimly. "Either that or they were targeting Hazel specifically," I finished, the thought sending ice through my veins. Why would anyone target Hazel? She was a healer, not involved in pack politics or territory disputes. Unless... Connor, I breathed. Connor Reynolds would have enemies as the heir to his pack. But to attack Hazel so openly, so brutally, this was an escalation beyond normal pack rivalries. "You should get to the healing den," I told the driver, noting how he winced as he shifted his weight. "I can drive you." He shook his head. Miss Winters, that's not proper protocol. To hell with protocol, I snapped. You're injured and I have a car. Let's go. Just as I turned toward my vehicle, 2 black SUVs screeched to a halt at the scene. My heart leapt into my throat as a familiar figure stepped out from the first one. Roman. His alpha aura radiated cold authority as he surveyed the wreckage, before his blue eyes locked onto me. "Weren't you away on pack business?" I asked, surprised to see him here. He approached quickly, his gaze taking in my thin clothing. Without a word, he pulled me into his arms, his embrace both comfort and reprimand. "Why did you come out in so little?" he asked, his voice a low rumble against my ear. Only then did I realize I was shivering violently. In my panic, I hadn't noticed the biting cold, but now it seemed to slice through me like knives. Roman began shrugging off his heavy coat, but before he could wrap it around me, Wilson appeared, hurrying from a newly arrived car. "Alpha, Miss Winters' coat," he said, holding out my thick winter jacket. Roman took it from him and draped it over my shoulders. "Arms out, put this on properly." Chapter 265, Dangerous Revelations. Half an hour after leaving the accident scene, I burst through the doors of the pack healing den. My heart hammered in my chest as I rushed down the sterile corridor, following the distinct scent of antiseptic mixed with blood. The tension in the air was palpable. Several pack healers stood nervously against the wall, their postures rigid with anxiety. Their gazes kept darting toward a tall figure pacing at the end of the hallway. Connor Reynolds. Even from a distance, I could feel the dangerous alpha aura radiating from him. His face was contorted with barely contained rage as he barked into his phone. "Bring that truck driver here. I want to interrogate him myself," he growled, his voice echoing through the corridor. "I don't care about protocol. This is my territory, my jurisdiction." The pack healing den's head healer, an older wolf with silver-streaked hair, stood nearby with his staff. They all maintained a careful distance, clearly wary of the crackling energy emanating from Connor. His wolf power was practically visible in the air around him, making everyone instinctively step back. I slowed my approach, observing the scene. Connor's normally composed demeanor was completely shattered. His knuckles were white as he gripped the phone, and a muscle twitched in his jaw. He ended the call abruptly and turned to a beta wolf I recognized as Isaac, his chief enforcer. "Check the truck driver's financials. I want to know who paid him." Isaac nodded, seemingly unsurprised by the order. "Already started, Alpha. Something felt off about this from the beginning. I pulled his information while we were in the ambulance." Connor's eyes flashed with approval. Years of service had clearly taught Isaac to anticipate his Alpha's needs. Isaac handed his phone to Connor, who scrolled through whatever information had been gathered. The atmosphere in the hallway grew even more tense as Connor's expression darkened further. "Just as I suspected," he muttered, his voice low and dangerous. The head healer and a pack administrator stood nearby in fearful silence. I could practically see their wolves cowering beneath their skins as they waited for Connor's next move. Connor handed the phone back to Isaac. "Detain Lydia Miles. Hand her over to Alpha Blake's territory enforcers for formal questioning." Isaac hesitated briefly. "Alpha, Lydia is distantly related to your mother. Luna Reynolds has been pushing for. Can she represent pack law?" Connor cut him off, his voice ice cold. Isaac sighed almost imperceptibly. "No, Alpha." "Then do as I say," Connor ordered. "Lydia will be detained regardless of her connections." Isaac nodded, clearly accepting the command while inwardly bracing for the fallout. Familial connections ran deep in wolf packs, and Luna Reynolds wouldn't take kindly to her favorite being investigated. Connor pulled out a cigarette and lit it, ignoring the no smoking signs plastered on the walls. None of the healing staff dared to admonish him. The cloud of smoke encircled his tall frame as he brooded, leaning against the wall. I approached cautiously, and Connor's eyes flickered to me briefly before returning to stare at the emergency room doors. He didn't speak, and I didn't push. Suddenly, the doors swung open. A team of healers wheeled out a gurney, and my heart leapt into my throat when I saw Hazel's pale face. Connor practically lunged forward, his cigarette dropping forgotten to the floor. He grabbed Hazel's hand, his entire demeanor transforming in an instant. "Hazel," he murmured, his voice an unsteady mixture of fear and relief. His fingers trembled slightly as they hovered over the bandage on her forehead, touching it with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the rage he'd displayed moments before. The attending healer spoke quickly. Miss Walsh only has some external injuries but still needs to be observed overnight. Connor's gaze traveled down to Hazel's bandaged leg, his jaw tightening. The contrast between her pale skin and the stark white bandages seemed to affect him deeply. I stepped closer, and Hazel's eyes found mine. She immediately reached for my hand, pulling hers away from Connor's grasp. "Scarlet," she whispered, her voice weak but determined. The look on Connor's face was one of pure, raw pain as Hazel deliberately withdrew from him. He stood frozen, suddenly looking lost despite his imposing presence. "I'm so sorry," I said to Hazel, guilt washing over me. "This happened because I asked you to come to Shadow Valley. If I hadn't—" "Don't," Hazel interrupted. "It's not your fault. The driver Roman sent me. He saved my life." She closed her eyes briefly, reliving the moment. When the truck came at us, the driver had a split second to choose. The truck driver tried to save himself when he realized he couldn't complete his task. But my driver, he deliberately positioned the car to shield me. He took the impact and still managed to subdue the attacker. Her voice was calm but edged with the unmistakable trauma of someone who had stared death in the face. "Someone really wanted me dead, Scarlet." The words hit Connor like a physical blow. His face paled as the reality sank in. If not for the quick thinking of the Thornpack driver, Hazel would likely not have survived. I squeezed Hazel's hand tighter, dread sinking into my gut. The malice in Connor's pack had grown so deep that someone would actually attempt to kill Hazel in broad daylight. Despite whatever conflict existed between them, I suddenly understood how much Connor's protection had been shielding her all along. My head throbbed with each heartbeat, but the pain was secondary to the realization that had crystallized in my mind during those terrifying seconds before impact. I looked at Scarlet, her emerald eyes filled with concern. "Are you still planning to leave for the Eastern Territories tonight?" I watched as uncertainty flickered across her face. The guilt was evident. Knowing the threat to my life, she couldn't bring herself to leave now. She hesitated. Making a sudden decision, I spoke firmly. "I'll go with you." The words hung in the air, leaving both Scarlet and Connor stunned. Connor's face darkened instantly, his wolf energy crackling dangerously. "Scarlet, you have a way, don't you?" I pressed, holding her gaze. I knew what I was asking, for her to use Roman Thorne's considerable influence to help me escape the Reynolds Pack territory. Scarlet glanced nervously at Connor, clearly recognizing the dangerous line I was walking. Connor's patience snapped. He snatched my hand from Scarlet's, his grip firm but not painful. "Shouldn't you?" he began, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Give you a reasonable explanation?" I cut him off, years of pent-up hurt and anger rising to the surface. "Shouldn't you explain why your mother has been hostile to me for all these years? What right does she, or the entire Reynolds Pack, have?" The fierce energy in my eyes must have stunned him because Connor stood wordless, his usual confidence shattered. With one final wrench, I pulled my hand free from his grasp. I stared at him coldly, all the warmth I once felt completely extinguished by years of suffering and today's near-death experience. In that moment, something in Connor's eyes changed. The anger drained away, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Don't you trust me anymore?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Chapter 266, The Breaking Point. The healing den corridor fell into a heavy silence. I stood frozen, watching the tense standoff between Hazel and Connor. His fingers tightened around her wrist, the veins on his hand prominent as he repeated her name. Hazel. Her face was pale from the accident, but her eyes blazed with a quiet fury I'd never seen before. The bandage on her forehead stood out starkly against her skin. "I want some peace," she bit out, her voice ragged with exhaustion. "I don't want to see you right now. Is that too much to ask?" The final words seemed to hang in the air, weighted with layers of unspoken pain. Connor's jaw tightened, his alpha energy crackling dangerously around us. The pack healers pressed themselves against the wall, their wolves instinctively submitting to his power. I'd never seen them like this before. Connor had always been Hazel's fiercest protector, her unwavering champion against Luna Reynolds' disapproval. What could have possibly driven such a deep wedge between them? "Connor," I said carefully, stepping forward. "Hazel was just injured in that crash. She may not be thinking clearly right now. Please give her some space and time." The word injured seemed to penetrate his haze of anger. His eyes flickered to the bandage on Hazel's forehead, then down to her wrapped leg. His grip loosened slightly, like his wolf momentarily retreating. "I need to speak with Hazel alone," I added, keeping my voice gentle but firm. Connor's eyes met mine briefly. I could see the battle raging within him, his alpha instincts demanding control versus the rational part that knew Hazel needed care, not confrontation. This coldness from Hazel was unprecedented. Even when facing problems within the Reynolds pack, she had never shown such open resistance to Connor himself. I remembered the first signs that something critical had shifted between them, small moments of tension during our recent interactions that I'd brushed aside as ordinary couples' disagreements. Connor finally released his hold on Hazel's wrist. Without another word, he turned and strode down the corridor, his powerful presence leaving a wake of tension behind him. The healing staff remained frozen until he disappeared around the corner. Only then did they spring into action, quickly ushering Hazel toward a private room. Despite the Reynolds pack's general disapproval of her, Hazel's status as Connor's most precious she-wolf still commanded respect. Inside the private room, with Ethan Clark standing respectfully near the door, I finally had a moment alone with Hazel. I took her hand gently, noting the bruises forming on her wrist where Connor had gripped her. "What happened between you and Connor?" I asked softly. "You were fine before." I hesitated, then added, "And who is Isabel Vance?" I'd overheard Connor on the phone earlier, ordering someone to hand Isabel Vance over to Officer Davies. The name meant nothing to me. She wasn't someone I recognized from my time in the Northern Territories. Was she perhaps a she-wolf Connor had met through Luna Reynolds' matchmaking efforts? Could she be connected to the truck that had nearly killed Hazel today? Hazel sighed, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion. "Connor's distant cousin," she explained warily. "There's no real blood relation to the Reynolds pack." She closed her eyes, clearly unwilling to elaborate further. Instead, she changed the subject entirely. "Let's not talk about them. Scarlett, I want to leave the Northern Territories. Will you take me?" The request caught me off guard. Hazel had endured years within the Reynolds pack, weathering Luna Reynolds' constant disapproval with quiet dignity. For her to ask this now, something truly devastating must have happened. "Of course," I replied without hesitation. "I'll take you." The despair in her eyes was acute, cutting straight to my heart. Hazel was one of the strongest she-wolves I knew. For her to reach a breaking point where escape seemed the only option was extraordinary. In that moment, I understood that what mattered wasn't pushing for answers or explanations. What she needed was unconditional support, a silent solidarity in her darkest hour. Hazel's eyes, clouded with sorrow, suddenly brightened with a fragile hope. "Really?" she whispered, then her face fell. "But Connor won't let me go that easily. His wolf is too." "Protective," I offered. "Possessive," she corrected, her voice flat. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Don't worry, I have a way." Closing my eyes briefly, I reached for the mate bond connecting me to Roman. The familiar warmth of his presence flooded through me as I silently explained the situation, asking for his help. His response was immediate and certain. He would take care of everything. I opened my eyes to find Hazel watching me intently. "Roman will handle it," I assured her. "We'll take you with us tonight." The tension visibly drained from her body, her shoulders slumping as if a great weight had been lifted. "I should call Aiden," I continued, pulling out my phone. "We need him to check you before we travel." Hazel managed a bitter smile. "You're lucky, you know, to have someone like Roman." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. "The way you can just ask for what you need," she said quietly. "And he listens. He actually listens." She turned her face toward the window, where the fading Northern Territory light cast long shadows across the floor. "I thought that's what Connor and I had once," she continued, her voice barely audible. "But now I see how much I've been forced to compromise, how much I've had to silence my own wolf to fit what everyone else wanted." I remained silent, giving her space to speak truths that had clearly been bottled up for too long. "I'm tired, Scarlett." she whispered. I'm so tired of fighting to be accepted in a pack that has never wanted me. I dialed Aiden's number, watching as Hazel closed her eyes, the exhaustion of the day, and perhaps years of silent endurance, finally catching up with her. I stared at my empty water glass, debating whether it was worth venturing downstairs for a refill. My throat burned from the overly salty noodles I'd managed to force down earlier. The thought of encountering Erik Blackwood or his volatile packmates again made my stomach clench with anxiety. After the cooking disaster and Leo's dramatic reaction, I'd been hiding in my room, counting the hours until Scarlett's return. Just as I mustered enough courage to reach for the doorknob, my phone rang. Scarlett's name flashed on the screen, and I snatched it up eagerly. "Emma, there's been a change of plans," Scarlett's voice came through, sounding tense but determined. "Hazel will be coming with us to the European territories." I blinked in surprise. "Hazel, is she coming to visit?" A sudden thought struck me. "Is Connor coming too?" In my mind, the two were inseparable. Connor's alpha instincts would never allow Hazel to travel alone, especially not to another alpha's territory. "No," Scarlett replied firmly. "Connor is not coming." "What? But—" I couldn't hide my shock. Connor would never let Hazel go anywhere without him. "It's complicated," Scarlett sighed. "Hazel was in an accident today. I think someone tried to kill her." My blood ran cold. Kill her? Why would anyone want to hurt Hazel? "I don't know all the details yet," Scarlett admitted, "but she's asked to leave the Northern Territories and I've agreed to help her." I tried to process this bewildering turn of events. Connor Reynolds allowing Hazel to leave his protection? It seemed unthinkable. "Was it connected to Connor?" I asked tentatively. "I think so," Scarlett replied. "She mentioned someone named Isabel Vance, a distant cousin of Connor's." Before I could ask anything else, a sharp knock on my door made me jump. "Who's there?" I called, my voice higher than normal. "Time to change your bandage." Erik Blackwood's cold voice sent a shiver down my spine. "I have to go," I whispered urgently to Scarlett. "Eric's at my door." "Be careful," Scarlett cautioned. "We should be there by morning." I ended the call and stared at the door, my nerves stretched thin once more. Another encounter with Erik Blackwood was the last thing I needed right now. Without my own pack's protection, I was completely at his mercy. If I said the wrong thing and sparked his alpha temper, there would be no one to step between us, no one to shield me from his wrath. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and moved toward the door. Chapter 267, Testing the Alpha. If I were still the same Emma Chase from the Northern Territories, I would have definitely snapped back at Erik Blackwood. I wouldn't have hesitated to voice my thoughts or stand my ground. But now, I don't dare at all. "Go back to the Eastern Territories first," I said to Scarlett on the phone, my voice barely above a whisper. Erik Blackwood was a wolf I could barely tolerate for even a minute, yet I had no choice but to endure his presence. This situation was truly infuriating and impossible. After ending the call with Scarlett, I took a deep breath and mustered what little courage I had left. I opened the door slowly, expecting to find Eric's intimidating figure waiting outside. To my surprise, the hallway was empty. Where did he go? I could have sworn I heard his voice just moments ago. Relief washed over me as I ventured further out. I moved quietly down the stairs, checking each room. Neither Erik nor his beta enforcers were anywhere to be seen. They must have left. My throat felt like sandpaper from anxiety and those horribly salty noodles. I rushed to the kitchen, gulping down a glass of water, then another. The cool liquid soothed my parched throat but did little to calm my nerves. What did Erik want with me? He said something about changing bandages. Was he injured again? My healer instincts battled with my self-preservation. After several more minutes, I finally gathered enough courage to head upstairs to Erik's room. My movements were cautious now, almost painfully so. The constant surprises in Erik's world had thoroughly shaken my confidence. I approached his door and raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. What if he was in a bad mood? What if Leo had angered him further? What if... No, I needed to do this. I couldn't hide in my room forever. I knocked softly, then pressed my ear against the door, listening for any sound. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. "Come in," Erik's deep voice called from inside. I slipped into the room, keeping my eyes averted. I couldn't bring myself to look at him directly, afraid of what I might see, anger, mockery, or worse, that dangerous gleam that made my wolf whimper beneath my skin. But what awaited me was something I hadn't prepared for. Erik was sitting on the edge of his bed, bare-chested. My breath caught in my throat. His muscular physique was imposing enough, but what truly arrested my attention was the pack tattoo. It wound up from his chest to his neck, ferocious and vivid, with eyes that seemed to burn with animosity. For the first time, I clearly saw that part of the tattoo on his neck formed the gaze of an angry wolf, something I hadn't noticed before. Its power unsettled me, making me tremble inside. My own wolf cowered as if sensing a much stronger, more dangerous predator. "Why are you just standing there? Come here." Erik's cold voice sliced through my thoughts. I tightened my grip on the doorframe, my knuckles turning white. "Put your shirt on," I stammered, my voice laced with embarrassment and nervousness. I was trying to set a boundary, however small. Erik's lips curled into a mocking smile. "You? Want me to mind the situation's influence? Am I not allowed even this tiny request?" I protested, frustration momentarily overriding fear. Erik laughed, the sound both chilling and somehow captivating. "Didn't see you minding the influence last time at the bay." My face burned with embarrassment as I recalled what he was referring to, that mortifying moment when I'd accidentally grabbed something I shouldn't have. "Or what about when you pulled off my bath towel?" he continued, his amber eyes glinting with amusement. That was it. Without thinking, I surged forward and clamped my hand over his mouth, desperate to stop the words from coming out. "Don't say that," I hissed. The moment I realized what I'd done, I froze. We were so close now, his breath warm against my palm, our bodies mere inches apart. I could feel the heat radiating from his bare chest, smell the faint scent of his skin, clean, with hints of something woodsy and distinctly him. Before I could retreat, Erik wrapped his arms around my waist, squeezing gently. The sensation startled me, and I realized with horror that I'd somehow ended up in his arms again. "Let go of me," I said, my tone oscillating between indignation and panic. I was afraid, yes, but I refused to appear weak in front of him. "You jumped into my arms yourself," Erik teased, his voice low and far too close to my ear. So why so angry? My face flushed even redder. But beneath the embarrassment I felt something else, a strange warmth spreading through me, starting where his hands rested on my waist. Something was wrong. I glanced down at my legs, puzzled by the unfamiliar sensation coursing through them, an electric rush I barely comprehended. It felt like my wolf was stirring beneath my skin, not in fear this time, but anticipation? Startled and afraid of these confusing feelings, I bounced away from Erik, putting as much distance between us as possible. My mind was whirling, thoughts jumbled and incoherent. You, I began, but words failed me completely. Erik remained seated on the bed, watching me with that infuriatingly calm expression, a hint of amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. Without another word, I fled his room, slamming the door behind me. I ran to my own room, locked the door, and leaned against it, my heart pounding wildly. I was shivering, though not from cold, my wolf whimpering in confusion beneath my skin. What had just happened? Third person's POV. Meanwhile, Scarlet Winters sat in the Pack Healing Center, her mind divided between concern for Hazel Walsh and confusion over Emma's latest call. "Scarlet, your news was wrong. Who told you that?" Emma had demanded without preamble. Scarlet blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. It took her a moment to realize that Emma wasn't referring to Hazel's accident. She hadn't yet told her the details of the injury. "Which news?" Scarlet asked carefully. She'd heard endless gossip about Erik lately, particularly from Emma herself. "About Erik. About whether he's able," Emma clarified, her voice dropping to a whisper on the last word. Scarlet was stunned. Wasn't it common knowledge that Erik Blackwood had no interest in taking a mate? Even Leo had once sent a particularly beautiful she-wolf to his room, only for Erik to toss her out within a minute. "What do you mean?" Scarlet pressed, curious now. "Of course he is," Emma insisted, her tone suggesting this shouldn't even be a question. Scarlet lowered her voice, incredulous. "So you tested it?" "Don't say that," Emma scolded immediately, sounding scandalized. "That's nonsense." "Then how do you know?" Scarlet challenged. There was a pause, and Scarlet could almost feel Emma blushing through the phone. "I just know from being in his arms," Emma finally admitted, her voice barely audible. Scarlett's brain short-circuited. In his arms? When had Emma been in Erik's arms? And why? The implications made her head spin. "What do you mean, in his arms?" she demanded, unable to contain her curiosity. On the other end of the line, Emma made a frustrated noise. "Nothing. Forget I said anything. I'm not going to explain further, because you'll just make wild guesses." "Emma." Scarlett began, but the call ended abruptly. Scarlett stared at her phone, torn between concern for her friend and intense curiosity. What exactly was happening between Emma and Erik Blackwood? Back in his room, Erik's lips were curled in a devilish smile as he savored the lingering fragrance Emma had left in his embrace. There was a new sense of intrigue in his amber eyes, a deepening interest that hadn't been there before. Erik was a wolf Emma could barely tolerate for even a minute, yet she had no choice but to endure. This was truly infuriating and difficult. Chapter 268, Blood and Departures. I clutched my phone tightly as Scarlett's voice came through, her words hitting me like a physical blow. "Hazel was in a car accident today. I think someone tried to kill her." "Kill her? What? Is she okay?" I gasped, my heart hammering in my chest. Hazel was one of the gentlest wolves I knew. Who would want to harm her? "She's stable now," Scarlett assured me, but it was serious. The car was completely crushed on one side. I sank onto the edge of my bed, my mind racing. But why? Who would do that to Hazel? "I don't have all the details yet," Scarlett replied, her voice tight with worry. "But it seems connected to someone in Connor's pack, a she-wolf named Isabel Vance." Connor's pack? This made even less sense. Connor Reynolds was practically obsessed with Hazel's safety. He wouldn't let anyone in his pack threaten her. Is that why she's coming to the Eastern Territories? To get away from the danger? There was a brief pause. "It's not just that," Scarlett said finally. "Something happened between her and Connor. I've never seen Hazel like this, Emma. She's broken." I tried to imagine what could possibly have driven Hazel and Connor apart. Despite Luna Reynolds' constant disapproval of Hazel, Connor had always been her staunchest defender. But she's still coming? Even after being injured? "She insists," Scarlett confirmed. "We're still leaving tonight as planned. Roman's arranged everything." Wow. I struggled to find words. Is she running from Connor himself then? Scarlett sighed heavily. "I think so. She refuses to even look at him now." This was getting stranger by the minute. Hazel adored Connor, had done so for years. What could have happened to make her want to flee the Northern Territories so desperately? But how is she going to travel in her condition? I asked, my healer instincts kicking in. "Aiden's with her now. He says she's cleared to fly, but needs rest." Another thought struck me. Is Connor just letting her go? That doesn't sound like him at all. "Roman's handling it," Scarlett replied simply, as if that explained everything. And in a way it did. Roman Thorne's influence stretched far and wide. If he decided Hazel was coming to the Eastern Territories, then she was coming, regardless of what Connor Reynolds might want. "I'll see you tomorrow then?" I confirmed, relieved that Scarlett was still coming back as planned. "Yes, first thing in the morning," she promised. We were about to end the call when a sharp knock at my door made me jump. "Emma." Erik Blackwood's deep voice sent an immediate shiver down my spine. My body reacted instantly, a rush of heat flooding my face, my heart rate accelerating. Then I felt it, the warm trickle from my nose. Looking down, I saw drops of blood staining the gray hoodie I wore. "I have to go," I whispered hurriedly to Scarlett. "Erik's at my door." I ended the call and frantically wiped at my nose with my sleeve, only succeeding in smearing the blood further. Rushing to the bathroom, I grabbed tissues and cleaned myself up as best I could. The bleeding stopped quickly, but my hoodie was definitely stained. With no time to change, I took a deep breath and opened the door, keeping my head slightly lowered so he wouldn't notice anything amiss. Erik stood in the hallway, imposing as always. Even in casual clothes, he radiated authority. "You forgot about my bandages," he said, his amber eyes studying me intently. I blinked. Of course, the silver bullet wound. With everything that had happened, I'd completely forgotten I was supposed to change his dressing. "I'm sorry, I was on the phone with Scarlett and—" I stopped abruptly when I realized Erik was looking at my hoodie. "You're bleeding," he observed, his voice neutral. My hand flew to my nose instinctively. It's nothing, just a nosebleed. Erik's gaze sharpened. Again? That's the second time today. The concern in his voice caught me off guard. Was he actually worried about me? Do you need me to call a pack healer? He asked, taking a step closer. I backed away, mortified at the thought. What would I tell a healer? That I got nosebleeds from looking at him? That my wolf went haywire whenever he was near? No, it's just dry air. I get them sometimes, I lied weakly. I'll be fine. Erik didn't look convinced, but he didn't press the issue. I'll come to your room in a few minutes to change your bandages, I promised, desperate to end this conversation. Just let me clean up first. He nodded once. Don't take too long. As he turned to walk away, I called after him. Wait for me. I'll be right there. The words hung in the air, suddenly sounding more intimate than I'd intended. Erik paused briefly, then continued down the hall without looking back. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart still racing. What was wrong with me? Why did Erik Blackwood affect me this way? It was humiliating. Groaning, I changed into a clean shirt and gathered the first aid supplies I would need for his wound. Whatever was happening to me, I needed to get it under control and fast. I watched as Aiden Walsh finished examining Hazel, his experienced hands gentle but thorough. The pack healing den was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. She's stable enough to travel, Aiden concluded, turning to me. The injuries are mostly superficial, though she'll need to take it easy for a few days. Relief washed through me. Thank you, Aiden. Hazel lay on the recovery bed, her face pale but composed. The bandage on her forehead stood out starkly against her skin, a visual reminder of how close we'd come to losing her today. Since Connor had left, I'd noticed a distinct change in her demeanor. The spark that usually animated her features had dimmed, replaced by a brittle determination that worried me deeply. In all the time I'd known her, Hazel had been a model of composure and resilience. Seeing her so fragile made my chest ache. You're really taking her to the Eastern Territories? Aiden asked quietly, packing away his instruments. I nodded firmly. Yes. And Connor is allowing this? Aiden raised an eyebrow skeptically. Roman said he would handle everything. I replied, confidence flowing through me at the thought of my mate. Aiden smiled slightly. Of course he did. Just then, I felt the familiar warmth of Roman reaching out through our mate bond. Scarlett, is there anything specific you want packed from your room at Shadow Valley? Roman's voice filled my mind, steady and reassuring. I closed my eyes briefly, focusing on our connection. Just the gifts I bought for Natalie and Luna Catherine. I don't need anything else from here. I had already decided I didn't want to take anything else from the Northern Territories with me. The bitter memories associated with this place outweighed any material possessions. All right, Roman acknowledged. I'll come pick you both up in an hour. The plane is being prepared. We'll be ready. Are you tired? He asked, a note of concern coloring his thoughts. You should rest before the flight. I'm fine. I want to stay with Hazel, I insisted. The connection faded slightly as Roman turned his attention elsewhere, but the lingering warmth of his presence remained in my mind. I opened my eyes to find Hazel watching me curiously. Roman? She guessed. I nodded, still marveling at how easily she could read the subtle changes in my expression. Before we could speak further, the door opened and 2 pack servants entered, carrying an additional recovery bed. They quickly set it up on the opposite side of the room from Hazel's. I blinked in surprise. What's this for? The beta healer who had followed them in bowed slightly. For you, Miss Winters. Alpha Thorn instructed us to prepare a comfortable place for you to rest before your journey. I felt a rush of warmth at Roman's thoughtfulness. Even in the midst of arranging our hasty departure, he was still thinking of my comfort. As the servants finished setting up the bed and left with the beta healer, Hazel let out a soft laugh. He really does think of everything, doesn't he? She observed, a hint of wistfulness in her voice. I almost responded that Connor was equally attentive to her, but caught myself just in time. Whatever had transpired between them had clearly destroyed something precious. I didn't want to cause her more pain by bringing up Connor's name. Instead, I studied her face carefully. The determination I saw there told me everything I needed to know about how serious this rupture was. Hazel wasn't just seeking temporary refuge. She was making a clean break. "Are you really coming with me to the Eastern Territories?" I asked softly. Hazel nodded, her expression unwavering. "Of course, and thank you for this." Chapter 269, Confrontation at the Pack Healing Den, Third Person's POV. The tension in the Pack Healing Den was palpable as Hunter Stone stood guard outside Scarlett's room. His tall frame effectively blocked the doorway, shoulders squared and expression stoic. The Beta Wolf's loyalty to Roman Thorn was absolute. It had been forged through years of service and mutual respect. Inside the healing room, Scarlett Winters had just settled onto the comfortable recovery bed that Roman had arranged for her. She was exhausted from the day's events, particularly the emotional toll of Hazel's accident. Just as she was about to close her eyes, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor, accompanied by an agitated voice that made her groan internally. Daniel Winter. Hunter immediately stepped forward, his stance widening as he prepared to intercept the Winter Pack heir. "Alpha Erik Winter," Hunter's voice was firm but polite. "Our young lady doesn't want to see you. Please leave." Daniel Winter came to an abrupt halt. His face was flushed from the bitter cold outside, where he'd been waiting fruitlessly at Shadow Valley's gates. Hours in the freezing temperature had chilled him to the bone and fueled his frustration to dangerous levels. "Get out of my way," Daniel snarled, his composure shattering completely. His wolf energy crackled dangerously around him, filling the corridor with an aggressive alpha aura. Several pack healers instantly pressed themselves against the walls, their wolves cowering beneath their skins. Hunter Stone remained unmoved, his own beta energy rising to meet the challenge. Though technically outranked, Hunter's years as Roman Thorn's right hand had hardened him. He'd faced far more dangerous wolves than Daniel Winter. "Alpha Erik Winter?" Hunter's voice dropped an octave, taking on a warning edge. "I suggest you show some respect while in Thorn Pack territory." Daniel's eyes flashed with fury. "I came to see my sister. You have no right to keep me from her?" Hunter's expression hardened. "Alpha Erik Winter, watch your words. Miss Winters is not your sister. You're trying to claim kinship with the wrong she-wolf." The statement hit Daniel like a physical blow. For years, the Winter Pack had rejected Scarlett, favoring Grace despite the truth of their parentage. Now, when they desperately needed her connection to Roman Thorn, they suddenly remembered blood ties. "She is my flesh and blood," Daniel insisted, desperation bleeding into his voice. "I have pack rights. She is now the marked mate of Alpha Thorn, king of the Eastern Territories." Hunter cut him off coldly. "Are you certain you want to claim pack rights at the Thorn Pack's doorstep?" The warning landed with devastating precision. Daniel's face paled slightly as the implications sank in. He knew all too well what had happened to the Amber Pack after they'd crossed Roman Thorn. Given the Winter Pack's already fragile state, challenging the Thorn Pack's authority would be suicidal. Still, desperation drove him forward. Sarah Winter was in territory custody. Their pack was crumbling, and Scarlett was their only potential lifeline. "At least, let me see her once," Daniel pleaded, his voice losing some of its earlier aggression. "Just once." He'd received word that Scarlett would be flying back to the European territories that night. With the Winter Pack in crisis, he couldn't afford to wait. Hunter remained unmoved. "She has no bond with any of you. Why should there be a meeting?" The blunt question stripped away any remaining pretense. The truth hung naked between them. The Winter Pack had never truly accepted Scarlett, had never treated her as family. They only sought her out now because they needed something from her. Daniel's patience finally snapped. "Get out of my way. You have no pack right to stop me." His wolf surged beneath his skin as he lunged forward, attempting to physically push past Hunter. Though he feared the Thorn Pack's retribution, Hunter was just a beta in his eyes, someone he could overpower if necessary. It was a grave miscalculation. There was a sudden blur of movement, followed by a sickening and a loud crash as Daniel's body hit the opposite wall. His agonized howl echoed through the healing den as he clutched his already injured hand, now twisted at an unnatural angle. Inside the room, Scarlett and Hazel exchanged a knowing glance at the commotion. "Was that?" Hazel began. "Daniel," Scarlett confirmed, completely unbothered, probably trying to force his way in. She adjusted her pillow more comfortably. Let's get some rest. We've got a long flight ahead of us. Outside, Daniel's groans intensified as he struggled to his feet, still calling Scarlett's name desperately. Scarlett, please, just listen to me for 1 minute. In response, Scarlett calmly took out her phone and opened a hunt simulation game. Within seconds, the sounds of howls and simulated fights drowned out Daniel's pleas entirely. The volume was deliberately loud enough to reach the corridor. Hazel watched in amazement. You're something else, you know that? She couldn't help but be impressed by Scarlett's composure. If Daniel could see Scarlett casually playing games while he suffered outside, he would be absolutely livid. What's the point in listening to him? Scarlett replied without looking up from her game. The winter pack only remembers I exist when they need something. 2 hours later, the steady rhythm of Scarlett's game was interrupted by the arrival of Roman Thorne. Unlike Daniel's aggressive entrance, Roman's presence filled the room with a quiet authority that needed no announcement. Hunter Stone stood at attention near the door. Alpha, I've dealt with Alpha Hare Winter as instructed. Roman's gaze shifted to the corridor where faint bloodstains marked the wall. I apologize, Alpha. I might not have controlled my strength well, Hunter added, though there was little remorse in his tone. Wasn't his hand already broken? Roman asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Yes, Alpha. From his confrontation with the Amber Pack. He still tried to fight with it. Roman nodded, impressed despite himself at Daniel's tenacity. Then his attention shifted to the tall figure waiting silently behind him, Connor Reynolds. The Alpha's face was a mask of controlled displeasure, his golden eyes fixed on the door to Hazel's room. You have 10 minutes to convince her to stay willingly, Roman told him, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Otherwise. He left the threat unspoken, but his ice-blue eyes flashed with unmistakable meaning. Connor nodded once, understanding the terms perfectly. Roman entered the healing room to find Scarlett still engrossed in her game, fingers tapping rapidly on the screen as her character leaped between virtual trees. You're back already? She asked, barely looking up. It's been over 2 hours since I reached out through our bond, he replied, checking his watch. Without warning, he moved forward and lifted her from the bed, gathering her easily into his arms despite her startled protest. Roman, what are you doing? Put me down. He ignored her, carrying her toward the door. As they stepped into the corridor, Scarlett caught sight of Connor Reynolds waiting outside, his tall frame tense with anticipation. Understanding dawned on her face. You brought Connor to see Hazel. It wasn't a question. Roman carried Scarlett to another empty room down the hall, setting her gently on the bed there. She immediately crossed her arms over her chest, fixing him with an accusatory glare. Didn't you say you'd handle it? She demanded. Hazel doesn't want to see him. She was nearly killed today. Someone in Connor's pack tried to murder her. Her voice shook with indignation on her friend's behalf. After everything Hazel had been through, forcing a confrontation with Connor seemed cruel. Roman sat beside her, pulling her onto his lap in a gesture that had become habitual for him. His arms encircled her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. No matter what happened between them, they need to resolve it themselves, he explained gently. Running away won't solve anything. Scarlett leaned back against his chest, reluctantly acknowledging the wisdom in his words. Connor and Hazel had been circling each other for years. Whatever had finally broken between them needed to be addressed, not avoided. Still, her loyalty to her friend remained firm. If she still wants to come with us after talking to him, I'm taking her, Scarlett declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. I won't leave her here if she doesn't feel safe. Roman tightened his hold on her slightly, his breath warm against her neck. Fair enough. They sat in silence, waiting for the outcome of the confrontation next door. Scarlett remained determined to help Hazel escape if that's what her friend wanted, even as she recognized the truth in Roman's words. Running away wouldn't solve anything, but sometimes it was the only way to survive. Chapter 270, Reclaiming What's Owed. Hazel's POV. I sat in the sterile healing den room, the antiseptic smell burning my nostrils as I gazed at Scarlett. Her emerald eyes watched me carefully, concern evident in her expression. The decision had been made. I would not be leaving with her. If you need anything later, call me, Scarlett said softly. I'll come get you. The simplicity of her offer nearly broke something inside me. After years in the Reynolds pack, where every gesture came with strings attached, Scarlett's unconditional support felt like a revelation. "Thank you," I whispered, reaching out to hug her. Our embrace was brief but filled with unspoken understanding. I pulled back, meeting her eyes directly. "With you saying this, I'm not afraid of anything," I told her, feeling a new strength coursing through me. For so long, Connor Reynolds had been my only protection, my sole ally. Now I realized I had someone else, someone who would respect my choices while standing ready to help if needed. I closed my eyes briefly, my resolve hardening. "There are some things I must take back." Scarlett stiffened beside me. "What do you mean by that?" I could see alarm flashing in her eyes. She was beginning to understand that the situation between Connor and me went deeper than a simple lover's quarrel. "Don't worry," I assured her, my voice steadier than it had been in days. "I'll handle it myself." "You don't need to force yourself," Scarlett said, her brow furrowed with concern. "Roman and I can help before we leave." I shook my head firmly. "It's not forcing myself. With you behind me, I'm not afraid." The truth was, I had never truly been afraid. Not of Luna Reynolds, not of the pack's disapproval, not even of losing Connor. I had simply chosen not to take the small provocations seriously, to rise above the petty jealousies and slights. But now they wanted my life. Someone had deliberately orchestrated that crash, intended to end me permanently. That changed everything. "Are you sure?" Scarlett asked, searching my face. "I'm sure," I replied, feeling calmer than I had in years. "Some debts need to be paid." After Scarlett left, I reached for my phone on the bedside table. My hand was steady as I dialed a number few knew I possessed. The healing den was quiet now, the only sounds the distant beeping of medical equipment and the soft hum of the air conditioning. The line connected almost immediately. "Miss Walsh," answered a deep voice, respectful but cautious. "I want one of Lydia Miles's legs," I said coldly. No preamble, no explanation. There was a brief pause on the other end. "Are you certain?" "Completely." I knew without a doubt that Lydia had orchestrated the accident. She was too calculating, too ambitious. She'd been circling around Connor for months, with Luna Reynolds's obvious blessing. "It will be done," came the simple reply before the line went dead. I set the phone down and leaned back against the pillows. The gentleness that had always characterized my expressions disappeared completely, replaced by something harder, colder. The door opened quietly, and I didn't need to look up to know who had entered. Connor's distinctive scent filled the room, pine needles and winter air, a scent that had once brought me comfort. Our eyes met across the room. His face was carefully blank, but I knew him well enough to see the tension in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. He had heard my phone call. "You didn't leave," he stated, his voice neutral. "No," I replied simply. "Not yet." He moved to sit on the edge of my bed, his weight causing the mattress to dip. His hand reached out to turn my face toward him, his touch gentle despite the strength I knew he possessed. "What are you doing, Hazel?" he asked quietly. "This time, I don't want to rely on you," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I can't." For years, Connor had protected me from the worst of his pack's hostility. He'd confronted his mother countless times on my behalf, shut down rivals, created a bubble of safety around me. And yet, despite all his power and protection, these wolves had still dared to harm me. They'd escalated from whispers and snubs to attempted murder. "I need to stand on my own," I continued. "Only when I become my own pillar of strength will others fear approaching me." Connor's grip tightened on my shoulders, his eyes flashing with that dangerous alpha light. "I'll handle Lydia," he said coldly. "She'll regret being born." "No," I refused immediately. "This time, let me do it." His eyebrows rose slightly, surprise evident on his features. I had never challenged him like this before. "Why?" he asked, studying me intently. "Because I'll be more ruthless," I answered simply. And it was true. Connor had cleared countless obstacles for me over the years, yet somehow more enemies always appeared, like weeds sprouting through cracked concrete. Lydia was different. As Luna Reynolds' distant niece, she enjoyed special protection within the pack. With Luna Reynolds supporting her, any punishment Connor delivered would be tempered by pack politics and family considerations. That's exactly why I needed to handle this myself. I would be sufficiently merciless, delivering a response that would make the entire Reynolds pack think twice before rising against me again. After years of enduring their humiliations, of swallowing my pride for Connor's sake, I was finally ready to show them exactly who I was. The sleek private jet waited on the tarmac, its engines humming softly against the backdrop of falling snow. Roman guided me toward the airport's VIP lounge, his hand warm against the small of my back. "Are you sure you're okay with leaving Hazel behind?" he asked as we settled into the plush seating area. I nodded, though worry still gnawed at me. She made her choice. All I can do is respect it. Roman studied my face for a moment before nodding. "You're hungry. Do you want something to eat before we board?" I shook my head, sinking deeper into the cushions. Although I hadn't eaten since morning, my appetite had completely vanished. "Hunter prepared some venison stew for you," Roman tried again. "It's your favorite." The thought of food made my stomach turn slightly. "I'm not hungry." Instead of pushing further, Roman simply pulled me closer to him. I snuggled against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "We'll eat later then," he murmured, stroking my hair gently. I closed my eyes, feeling his concern. It was ironic in a way. Just a few weeks ago, he'd been worried about me eating too much and potentially hurting my stomach. Now his concern had shifted to my lack of appetite completely. The quiet moment was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps. I opened my eyes to see Aiden Walsh rushing into the lounge, his normally pristine appearance slightly disheveled. "Made it," he panted, collapsing onto the sofa opposite us. His coat was dusted with snow, and his cheeks were flushed from the cold. He handed a small package to one of the service attendants, giving rapid instructions in a low voice. "The traffic was terrible," he explained, reaching for a water bottle. "But I got the moon-blessed herbs you requested." I raised an eyebrow in surprise. I hadn't requested any herbs. Aiden drained half the bottle in one go, then seemed to notice Roman's strange expression. His enthusiastic recounting of his journey through the Northern Territory's snow-blocked streets trailed off. "What?" he asked, looking between us. "I've decided," Roman said abruptly, "that you'll be overseeing the project in the Frostfang Wastes." Aiden froze mid-sip. "I'm sorry, what?" "The Frostfang Wastes," Roman repeated calmly. "I need someone I trust to oversee operations there." Aiden set his water bottle down with exaggerated care. "You can't be serious." "Do I look like I'm joking?" Roman replied. The Frostfang Wastes were notorious, a frozen, barren region where only the most hardened wolves ventured. The conditions there were brutal, the comforts non-existent. "Alpha Thorn," Aiden protested, his voice rising slightly. "I'm a healer, not a field operative. The Frostfang Wastes would kill me within a week." "You'll adapt," Roman said dismissively. No, Aiden shook his head vigorously. "There must be someone else more suited." "There isn't." Aiden's expression shifted from shock to desperation. "Alpha Thorn, considering I just rushed to buy herbs for the little princess, you can't treat me like this." At that moment, the service attendant returned with a steaming cup of herbal tea. The pungent aroma filled the lounge as she placed it in front of me. "For you, Miss Winters," she said with a respectful nod. "Mr. Walsh said it would help with your symptoms." I reached for the cup, but Roman's hand suddenly shot out, stopping me. "Are you sure she needs this medicine?" he asked Aiden sharply. His eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. Chapter 271. Harsh Assignment. Scarlett's POV. Roman's hand shot out to stop me from taking the cup of herbal tea. His movement was so sudden that it startled me. I looked at him in confusion, unable to understand why he would prevent me from drinking something Aiden had specifically prepared to help me. "Are you sure she needs this medicine?" Roman asked Aiden sharply, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Aiden blinked several times, clearly confused by Roman's question. "What do you mean?" "How did you determine what herbs to give her?" Roman pressed, his voice taking on that dangerous edge that made even powerful wolves cower. "I used my eyes to look," Aiden replied uncertainly, as if the question made no sense. "I observed her symptoms and selected appropriate herbs. That's how healing works." Roman's face darkened visibly. The atmosphere in the VIP lounge instantly grew heavy with tension. "If she has problems after taking this, will you take responsibility?" he asked coldly. Aiden's eyes widened in disbelief. problems? It's just moon-blessed chamomile with a touch of wildroot and honeysuckle, herbs to stimulate appetite. She's taken them before when she was recovering from injuries. I nodded quickly, trying to diffuse the situation. He's right, Roman. I've had this blend before. Despite my assurance, Roman took the cup from my hands and set it aside. The steaming liquid swirled inside, its rich aroma still filling the air between us. "What is going on with you?" Aiden asked, looking increasingly frustrated. "You're being ridiculous." I could feel Roman's body tense beside me, his wolf clearly agitated beneath his skin. "Am I?" Roman asked quietly. There was something in his tone that made me look up at him sharply. Aiden threw his hands up in exasperation. "Yes, completely and utterly ridiculous. This level of concern is suffocating. She's not a fragile pup. She's a strong she-wolf who's survived more than most." Roman's fingers threaded through my hair, the gentle caress at odds with the coldness in his voice. "She might be pregnant. Why are you giving her random herbs?" The room went completely silent. I felt as if all the oxygen had suddenly been sucked away, leaving me lightheaded and dizzy. Pregnant? I might be carrying a pup? Aiden's pupils contracted in shock as his gaze darted between Roman and me. His mouth opened and closed several times before he finally managed to speak. "Oh, moon goddess," he groaned, smacking his forehead with his palm. "That actually makes sense." I stared at Aiden, then at Roman, trying to process what I'd just heard. The loss of appetite, the unusual sleepiness, the changing food preferences. Aiden muttered, clearly connecting dots I hadn't even noticed. "I should have realized. It's so obvious now." "I'm pregnant?" I asked uncertainly, looking up at Roman. Aiden let out a strangled laugh. "You're the pregnant one. Why are you asking him?" My mind raced, trying to recall when this could have happened. Roman and I had been together many times since our mating, but pregnancy hadn't crossed my mind once. The possibility of becoming a mother, of carrying Roman's pup, was something I'd never allowed myself to imagine before. Roman continued stroking my hair, his touch impossibly gentle. But when he looked at Aiden, his expression was anything but soft. "This is why you're going to the Frostfang Wastes," he stated matter-of-factly. Aiden's face fell. "Are you serious? You're still sending me there?" More serious than ever. "But," Aiden sputtered, "I just didn't think of it. That's not a reason to banish me to that frozen hellscape." Roman's gaze was unwavering. "You didn't think of such a major issue? You, a healer from a long line of healers?" "People make mistakes," Aiden protested, his voice rising slightly. "Even healers aren't perfect." He turned to me desperately. "Scarlet, please tell him this is excessive. The Frostfang Wastes are no joke. Wolves have died from the cold alone, not to mention the territorial disputes with the northern rogues." I opened my mouth to intervene, feeling a pang of sympathy for Aiden despite his oversight. "If you ask for mercy for him," Roman cut in before I could speak, "I'll add 6 more months to his assignment." Aiden's eyes widened in alarm. He lunged forward, nearly tripping over the coffee table as he desperately waved his hands to stop me. "Don't say anything, little wolf," he exclaimed frantically. "I don't need help. I can handle it. The Frostfang Wastes sound lovely this time of year, very refreshing." Roman's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "Let's add more." "No need," Aiden interrupted, his voice pitched unnaturally high. "This is fine. Completely fine. I've always wanted to experience the wastes." He backed toward the door, bowing repeatedly. "I'll just go prepare for my trip. Need to calm down a bit. Maybe practice some meditation, or screaming into a pillow, whichever works best." With that, he fled the lounge, the door swinging shut behind him. I turned to Roman, unable to hide my concern. "You're being too harsh. He might hold a grudge." Roman's expression softened as he looked down at me. "There's important pack business in the Frostfang Wastes that only Aiden can handle effectively. It's not just punishment." I blinked in surprise. "It's not a punishment?" "Not entirely," he replied, caressing my head affectionately. "Do you still think me so cruel?" I nestled against him, not answering directly. The truth was, I'd seen a side of Roman these past weeks that I'd never witnessed growing up. The ruthless alpha who ruled the Eastern Territories with an iron fist was very different from the protective brother figure of my childhood. "Are you still afraid of me?" he asked quietly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "No," I replied quickly, perhaps too quickly. "I'm not afraid." Roman's knowing smile told me he wasn't convinced, but he didn't press the issue. Instead, he changed the subject. "Do you think you could be pregnant?" he asked, his voice gentle. The question sent a rush of warmth through me. Until now, the possibility hadn't felt real, just words hanging in the air between us. But thinking about it, actually considering the idea of carrying Roman's pup, filled me with unexpected wonder. "Am I really pregnant?" I asked, unable to keep the hope from my voice. Roman kissed my forehead softly. "It's possible. We'll know for certain soon." He must have noticed my slight disappointment at his inability to confirm it definitively. His eyes sparkled with amusement. "Do you want to be a mother?" he teased, drawing me closer. His lips brushed against my ear as he murmured, "The mother of our pup?" My face flushed crimson at his intimate tone. The VIP lounge suddenly felt entirely too public for this conversation. "Let me go," I stammered, glancing nervously at the door. "Someone might come in." Roman chuckled, his breath warm against my skin. "Still so shy, after everything we've done?" I tried to escape his embrace, but it was futile, as it had always been throughout our lives together. I'd never successfully escaped from Roman, not during childhood when he'd chased me for pack training, not during my rebellious adolescent phase when I'd tried to assert my independence, and certainly not now when I was firmly in his grasp. "Whose pup's mother could I be otherwise?" I retorted, trying to regain some composure. Roman's eyes lit up with amusement at my spirited response. He pinched my chin gently. "You've grown bolder, daring to talk back now." Chapter 272. No Mercy for the Desperate. The private lounge of the airport felt like a sanctuary, separating us from the chaos of the northern territories we were about to leave behind. Roman sat beside me, his presence solid and reassuring as we discussed the possibility of my pregnancy. My mind was still processing the revelation when Hunter Stone appeared at the doorway, his expression tense. "Alpha," he said, addressing Roman with a respectful nod. "Daniel Winter has arrived again. He's causing quite a scene, demanding to see Miss Winters." Roman's face hardened instantly. The tenderness that had been in his eyes moments before vanished, replaced by that cold alpha calculation I'd come to recognize. "Beat him and throw him out," he ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. I placed my hand on Roman's arm. "Wait." Both men looked at me with surprise. "Let me see him," I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. "If he wants to suffer, why not let him?" Roman's eyebrows drew together in concern. "Scarlett, you don't need to deal with him. We're leaving in less than an hour." "I know," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "But this might be the last chance I have to make things absolutely clear to the Winter Pack." For a moment, I thought Roman would refuse. The protective instinct that had always defined our relationship was evident in the tension of his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. But then he nodded once, conceding to my wish. "Hunter will stay with you," he said. It wasn't a request. I rose from my seat, smoothing down my clothes. "Where is he?" "In the main waiting area," Hunter replied. "We didn't allow him past security." I made my way through the airport's VIP corridor, Hunter following silently behind me. With each step, I felt a strange calmness descend upon me. There was a time when the mere thought of confronting my biological family would have filled me with anxiety or anger. Now I felt nothing but cold indifference. Daniel Winter stood near the security checkpoint, his face pale and drawn. His arm was still bandaged from his earlier encounter with Hunter, and fresh bruises mottled his skin. The once proud alpha heir of the Winter Pack looked utterly defeated. When he saw me, his expression brightened with undisguised hope. "Sister!" he exclaimed, reaching for my hand. I stepped back, avoiding his touch with a deliberate movement that made my revulsion clear. "Don't call me that," I said coldly. "What is it this time? Are you here for Grace or Sarah?" Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly at my tone. "Scarlett, please. I need your help. It's about Mother." "Of course it is," I replied, my voice flat. "You didn't care about blood ties when you were plotting with Grace to kill me. Only now that your pack is falling apart, do you suddenly remember I exist?" Daniel's eyes darted around nervously, perhaps fearful that someone might overhear our conversation. "Please, I'm begging you," he implored, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She's been suffering all these years with Father being unfaithful. She's just a pitiful Luna." A laugh escaped me, sharp and bitter. Pitiful? Sarah Winter has never been pitiful a day in her life. She's in territory custody, Daniel continued desperately. They won't let me see her. If you could just talk to Alpha Thorne. How is that my problem? I cut him off. She attacked your father's mistress. How am I supposed to let her go? Are you brain damaged? Daniel's face flushed with anger. This is all your fault. Ever since you came back to the Northern Territories, our pack has been falling apart. You did this to us. Yes, I admitted, meeting his accusation with calm acknowledgement. It's because of me, and I will not spare any of you. The shock on Daniel's face was almost comical. Why? He breathed. We're blood. Despite everything, we're family. I stepped closer to him, my voice dropping to ensure only he could hear my next words. From the moment you and Alexander Amber joined forces with Lucas Gray to try to kill me, all your pack's wealth and glory was destined to be crushed by me. It was only a matter of time. Daniel's face drained of color. You know about that? I know everything, I replied simply. Did you really think Roman wouldn't find out? Did you think the Shadow King would let an attempt on my life go unpunished? I felt as if the ground had opened beneath my feet. The coldness in Scarlett's eyes told me she wasn't bluffing. She knew everything. The secret alliance with Lucas Gray, the plan to eliminate her before she could reclaim her place in the Winter Pack, it had all been exposed. We were desperate, I stammered, my mind racing for anything that might save us. You have to understand, Grace was like a sister to us for 20 years. When you returned... Save your excuses, Scarlett interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. I don't care about your reasons. I had to try another approach. If appeals to her compassion wouldn't work, perhaps our shared blood would. Please, Scarlett, I begged, my voice breaking. Whatever you feel about me or father, Mother is still your blood too. The woman who gave birth to you. The woman who abandoned me, she corrected coldly. The woman who discovered I was her daughter and still chose Grace over me. The woman who would have celebrated my death if your plan had succeeded. Her words cut deeper than any physical blow. The truth of them was undeniable, which made them all the more devastating. It doesn't have to be this way, I tried again, desperation making my voice shake. We can start over, a real family this time. Behind Scarlett, I noticed Roman Thorne approaching. His tall figure moved with predatory grace, his presence commanding attention even from across the room. His ice-blue eyes locked with mine for a moment, and I felt my wolf cowering beneath my skin. Little wolf, he called to Scarlett, his deep voice carrying effortlessly. It's time to go. Scarlett turned toward his voice, her entire demeanor changing in an instant. The coldness melted away, replaced by a soft smile that transformed her face. It hurt to see that smile, a smile she had never once directed at any member of the Winter Pack. She turned back to me, her expression hardening once more. The blood ties between us and the maternal affection you speak of, you all abandoned those yourselves, she stated harshly. Words once spoken are like spit on the ground. Can you lick it back up, can you? I had no answer for her. The Winter Pack had made its choices long ago, choosing Grace over Scarlett, choosing ambition over family. Now we were paying the price. Without waiting for my response, Scarlett walked toward Roman, who extended his hand to her. She placed her hand in his, and he grasped it firmly, a simple gesture that showed how precious she was to him. I could only watch as they left together, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The person we had once dismissed as worthless was actually a treasure to the Thorn Pack. The one we had tried to eliminate had become the instrument of our destruction. Our mistake had been colossal, and now it was too late to fix it. The Winter Pack's fate had already been sealed by our own actions. As I stood alone in the airport, watching Scarlett disappear with her mate, I finally understood the full magnitude of what we had lost. Chapter 273, Shattered Airs and Whispers on the Wind. I watched as Scarlett Winters walked away with Roman Thorne, her hand nestled comfortably in his. The sight burned into my retinas like acid. What exactly had she done to deserve this level of devotion? Why was the Thorn Pack doting on her so extravagantly? The legendary Shadow King of the Eastern Territories, how could Roman Thorne have spoiled her to such an extent? In these past days, his ruthless crackdown on the Winter Pack's resources had known no bounds. Our businesses were crumbling, our allies deserting us like rats from a sinking ship. By the time I recovered my senses, Scarlett had already walked far away. I tried to chase after her, pushing past the security guards, but she had vanished without a trace within the secure airport lounge. Arg! In my fury, I slapped myself twice across the face, hard enough to leave red marks. Her words echoed in my mind. The blood ties between us and the maternal affection you speak of. You all abandoned those yourselves. She was right, and that truth was unbearable. Thinking of her merciless coldness toward me and her icy disdain for the winter pack, I felt as though I were going mad. The security guards watched me warily, their hands hovering near their weapons. I forced myself to turn away, my legs carrying me out of the airport on autopilot. Outside, the bitter cold slapped my face. I pulled out my phone and dialed Alexander Amber's number again. Nothing. Not even a rejection. Just silence. I tried Nathan Blake next. He answered, only to hang up as soon as he heard my voice. Everywhere I turned, former allies answered my calls with silence, or simply hung up. The Winterpack name had become toxic in the Northern Territories, with every acquaintance avoiding me like a carrier of plague. My heart pounded painfully in my chest as reality set in. We were finished. The Winterpack, once the pride of the Northern Territories, was crumbling to dust. Standing near the entrance, I seethed with impotent rage. The injustice of it all burned through my veins like fire. We had made mistakes, yes, but did we deserve this complete annihilation? Lost in my bitter thoughts, I didn't notice the hurried beta wolf until he bumped directly into me, nearly knocking me over. "Watch where you're going," he growled, barely sparing me a glance. Something in me snapped. All the humiliation, the rejection, the helplessness. It exploded outward like a volcano. "Can't you walk properly?" I shouted, grabbing his shoulder roughly. "Are your eyes blind? If they're useless, let me gouge them out." The beta's eyes widened, first with shock, then with recognition. "Alpha Air Winter?" He took a step back, intimidated but indignant. "I'm sorry for bumping into you, but—" I didn't let him finish. Needing an outlet, I shoved him hard, sending him stumbling backward. "Sorry isn't good enough. You think you can disrespect me just because my pack is having troubles?" The beta caught himself, his expression hardening. I apologized. "Don't push your luck." His defiance infuriated me further. In the past, no wolf would dare speak to me like this. I lunged forward, shoving him again, harder this time. That was a mistake. The beta, no longer intimidated, retaliated with a shove of his own. I staggered back, nearly falling. Before I could recover, he was on me, his face twisted with anger. "You're finished, Winter," he spat. "Everyone knows it. Your pack is nothing now." A crowd gathered quickly, drawn by the commotion. Some had their phones out, recording my humiliation. Territory security arrived within minutes, dragging us apart. "This isn't over," I shouted as they pulled me away, my face burning with shame. The security officers were rough, their grip bruising on my arms. They didn't care who I was, or rather, they knew exactly who I was, and it no longer mattered. The Winter Pack name carried no weight anymore. By the time I staggered back toward the Winter Pack house, night had fallen. My body was bruised, my head throbbing with each step. The imposing gate loomed before me like a cruel monument to my failures. I pushed it open, wincing at the screech of hinges that hadn't been oiled in weeks. The front garden, once immaculately maintained, was overgrown and neglected. The fountain had stopped running, its basin filled with dead leaves and stagnant water. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. The usual bustle of pack servants was missing, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to mock me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty foyer. No response. I walked further in, noticing the layer of dust that had accumulated on every surface. The gleaming marble floors I remembered from childhood were now dull and dirty. From the kitchen, I heard a clatter of pots. Hoping for some semblance of normalcy, I hurried toward the sound. Martha, our elderly Omega cook, was the only one there. She was gathering her personal items into a worn cloth bag, her face set in grim determination. "Martha," I said, relief flooding through me, "where is everyone?" She turned, her eyes widening at my battered appearance before narrowing again. "Gone," she said flatly. "2 Beta Pack servants and the head housekeeper walked out this morning. Unpaid pack stipends for 3 months now." My stomach dropped. "But you're still here." her mouth twisted bitterly. For now, waiting for what I'm owed, then I'm joining them. The last thread of my control snapped. Get to work, or get out, I barked, slamming my fist on the counter. Who do you think you are, giving me attitude? Martha didn't flinch. After decades serving the winter pack, nothing I did could intimidate her. She simply sneered, "Once my stipend is paid, I'm gone. Who made you the Alpha?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Not even an elderly Omega cook respected my authority anymore. I opened my mouth to retaliate, then closed it again. What was the point? She was right. I wasn't the Alpha. I wasn't anything. Silencing my own pain, I turned on my heel and stormed out of the kitchen, every nerve burning with helpless anger. The grand staircase, once a symbol of our pack's prosperity, now seemed to mock me with its faded opulence. As I climbed the stairs, raised voices reached my ears from the upper floor. I recognized Grace's voice immediately, high-pitched and desperate. "You're the only connection I have left to him. If you won't help, who will?" I followed the sound to her door, pressing my ear against it. "I only managed to secure those resources because of my influence with Marcus," she continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "Now you must get me the 40 million for my moon-blessed herb treatment." At the mention of 40 million, I froze. 40 million? Where had Grace gotten that kind of money from our pack resources? Realization and betrayal crashed through me in an instant. The missing funds from our pack accounts, the mysterious transfers that Father couldn't explain, it all made horrible sense now. Her desperation, her demands, her manipulation of pack resources through her connection to Jennifer Moore, who was Marcus's mistress and Grace's aunt, all of it fueled the icy edge of my rage. Without knocking, I burst into the room. Grace, perched weakly in her wheelchair near her vanity table, turned as she spat blood onto the polished surface, a consequence of her worsening silver poisoning. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Brother? You—" "Jennifer Moore is your aunt, indeed," I cut her off, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Quite the family connection you exploited." Grace's face drained of color. "Daniel, I can explain." "Shut your mouth, Grace," I hissed, my fists clenching at my sides. "Say another word and I swear I'll kill you." She flinched, her frail body trembling in the wheelchair. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I thought of our pack, of all the wolves who had depended on us, now left without resources because of her selfishness. A harsh tremor ran through the room as I spat. "You've brought this misery upon us. You deserve every drop of it." Grace gasped for breath, her eyes wide with fear. "If you throw me out, where will I go? I can't survive a night outside in my condition." I stared at her, seeing not my sister but a stranger who had helped destroy everything I cared about. "This isn't your home anymore. Get out." In a mad frenzy, I yanked open her wardrobe and began tossing her expensive clothes and belongings out of the window. Dresses, furs, jewelry fluttered into the courtyard below like bloated confetti. Grace screamed, attempting to wheel herself toward me. When that proved too slow, she lurched from the chair, falling hard onto the floor. She scrambled forward on her hands and knees, trying to pull herself along the floor, tears mixing with blood streaming from her nose. "Please, brother, don't do this," she sobbed, reaching for my ankle. I stepped away from her grasp, feeling nothing but cold rage. Third person's POV. The luxurious private jet soared through the night sky, its sleek form cutting through clouds like a silver knife. Inside, the atmosphere was one of quiet contentment, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in the winter pack house below. Scarlet Winters lay asleep in Roman Thorne's arms, her head nestled against his neck. The day's events had completely drained her, and she'd fallen asleep almost immediately after boarding. Her face looked peaceful in sleep, all the tension from her confrontation with Daniel Winter erased. Roman, while on a secure pack call, noticed her drifting off and automatically adjusted his position to make her more comfortable. That's all for now," he murmured into the phone, his voice deliberately low to avoid disturbing her. Before the person on the other end could respond, he ended the call, handed his phone to Hunter Stone, and carefully shifted his hold on Scarlett. With practiced ease, he lifted her into his arms and carried her toward the private lounge area in the back of the plane. Aidan Walsh trailed behind Hunter Stone, watching the scene with barely concealed irritation. He clicked his tongue in annoyance. "Look how spoiled she's become," he muttered, loud enough for Hunter to hear. His tone betrayed his lingering resentment about being sent to the Frostfang Wastes. The assignment felt like a severe overreaction to his medical oversight. Hunter Stone caught the bitterness in his voice and glanced back, his expression neutral but his eyes warning. "Be thankful it's only the Frostfang Wastes," he said quietly. Aiden frowned, not understanding the implication. "Huh?" Hunter's face remained impassive. "You know Alpha Thorn can be inhuman for the sake of his mate." Aiden's eyes went wide with sudden comprehension. The realization hit him like a bucket of ice water. Exiling him to the Frostfang Wastes was hardly something a sane Alpha would do to a skilled healer like him. But Roman Thorn wasn't just any Alpha. He was the Shadow King, a wolf whose ruthlessness was legendary throughout the territories. And when it came to Scarlet's well-being, that ruthlessness knew no bounds. Chapter 274, Mistakes and Misgivings. Third person's POV. The private jet hummed steadily through the night, its luxurious interior bathed in soft, ambient light. Roman Thorn carried Scarlet Winters toward the resting cabin, his movements careful and measured despite his considerable strength. Her sleeping form felt light in his arms, her auburn hair falling over his forearm as her head nestled against his chest. Inside the cabin, Roman gently laid Scarlet on the bed, his hands moving with practiced care as he positioned her head on the pillow. As he began to straighten up, he felt a slight tug on his shirt. Looking down, he noticed Scarlet's small hand still clutching the fabric, her fingers curled tightly even in sleep. A rare, genuine smile curved Roman's lips. This unconscious dependency, this need for him, even in her dreams, stirred something primal within his alpha core, a warmth he'd thought long buried beneath years of ruthless pack leadership. Carefully, he disentangled her fingers from his shirt, one by one, watching as her hand fell limply beside her. He pulled the blanket up to her chin, smoothing it over her sleeping form with a tenderness that would have shocked those who knew only the Shadow King of the Eastern Territories. For a moment, he simply stood there, drinking in the sight of his mate's peaceful face. The fierce she-wolf who challenged him at every turn now looked almost vulnerably young in sleep. Roman's ice-blue eyes softened as he watched her chest rise and fall with each breath. With reluctance, he finally turned away, pausing at the door for one last look before stepping out into the main cabin. Aiden Walsh was waiting outside, practically vibrating with barely suppressed indignation. The moment Roman emerged, Aiden shot him an accusing look, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "Do we really have to send me to the Frostfang Wastes again?" he grumbled, emphasizing the again with particular bitterness. Last time was brutal enough. Roman regarded the healer with cool amusement. "The pack has important business there that requires your expertise." "My expertise is healing, not freezing to death," Aiden retorted, then quickly added, "Alpha," remembering his place. Roman's expression remained neutral, but there was a hint of compromise in his tone. "How about I assign a few more pack members to assist you? It would make the task more manageable." Aiden's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "No." "No?" Roman echoed, one eyebrow raised. "No," Aiden repeated firmly. "If you send others, you'll just label it a team mission and extend my stay even longer. I know how you operate, Alpha Thorn." Roman chuckled, the sound low and surprisingly genuine. "You've grown more perceptive." "Survival instinct," Aiden muttered, then sighed heavily. "Fine, I'll go. But this is a one-time assignment, right? Just this once, and then I'm back to my regular duties?" Roman studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable. "That will depend on your performance." Aiden's face fell, his worst fears confirmed. "Of course it will," he mumbled, slinking away to a seat near the front of the plane, resignation written in every line of his body. In the Northern Territories, the aftermath of the Winter Pack's downfall rippled outward, touching even the once mighty Amber Pack. News spread like wildfire through pack channels and territory gossip networks. Alpha Marcus Winter had lost control, Sarah Winter remained in custody, and Daniel Winter had been publicly humiliated. The opulent halls of the Amber Pack estate, once filled with confident voices discussing territory politics, now echoed with uncertainty and whispered fears. Would they be next? Ava Amber burst through the estate's double doors, her face flushed with fury. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, her short hair wild as if she'd been running her hands through it repeatedly. She found her brother, Alexander Amber, in his study, his attention focused on a territory map spread across his desk. Without warning, she crossed the room in 3 quick strides and delivered a vicious kick to his abdomen. Alexander doubled over, the air rushing from his lungs in a pained whoosh. "What's wrong with you?" he gasped, clutching his midsection. Ava didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed a heavy crystal paperweight from his desk and hurled it at him. Alexander barely ducked in time, the crystal smashing against the wall behind him. "Have you lost your mind?" he demanded, straightening up, his wolf rising beneath his skin. "Me?" Ava snarled, her voice trembling with rage. "I'm not the one who hired assassins to kill innocent she-wolves." Alexander's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" The siblings faced each other across the study, their childhood camaraderie dissolved in a flurry of accusation and betrayal. Ava's eyes blazed with righteous anger, while Alexander's expression shifted rapidly between shock and guilt. "You even hired Kane, that rogue enforcer, to kill Scarlet Winters." Ava spat, her voice echoing off the walnut-paneled walls. The name struck like a thunderclap in the quiet room. From the doorway came a soft gasp, followed by the rapid clicking of heels on marble. Luna Victoria Amber had been descending the stairs when she overheard Ava's accusation, and the shock had stolen her balance. Victoria stumbled, her weakness from her recent pack-induced stress and hospitalization painfully exposed. She caught herself on the doorframe, her face ashen. "Alexander," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "is this true?" Alexander's expression crumpled. "Mother, please go back upstairs. This doesn't concern you." "Doesn't concern me?" Victoria repeated incredulously. "My son allegedly hiring assassins doesn't concern me?" Alexander turned back to Ava, his voice dropping dangerously low. "How did you learn that?" Ava scoffed, her lip curling in disgust. "Of course, I heard it from Scarlet herself." The confession shattered Alexander's composure. His shoulders slumped, the truth hanging heavy between them. Victoria, leaning heavily against the doorframe, suddenly straightened. Her initial shock gave way to a fierce, protective rage. "That she-wolf," she hissed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "This is all Scarlet Winters' fault. She's the one who's been destroying our pack, turning us against each other." Her twisted logic hung in the air, the desperate attempt of a mother to protect her son from the consequences of his own actions. Halfway across the ocean, Scarlet Winters tossed restlessly in her sleep, her brow furrowed as a nightmare gripped her. In her dream, she was back in the European territories, but something was terribly wrong. Emma Chase was sobbing uncontrollably, her small body shaking with each heart-wrenching cry. "I didn't mean to," Dream Emma kept repeating, her face streaked with tears. "I just wanted to help." Dream Scarlet tried to comfort her friend, but the more she reached out, the farther Emma seemed to drift away. With a sharp intake of breath, Scarlet jerked awake, her heart racing. Disoriented, she blinked rapidly, her eyes adjusting to the dim light of the cabin. Roman was seated beside her, a pack data slate in his hands, its blue glow illuminating his sharp features. At her sudden movement, he set it aside immediately, gathering her into his arms. "Nightmare again, little wolf?" he asked through their mate bond, his mental voice warm with concern. Scarlet blinked, her mind still hazy with the remnants of the dream. She nestled closer to his chest, drawing comfort from his familiar scent. "I dreamt of Emma," she murmured, her voice tinged with worry even through their mental connection. Roman's brow furrowed slightly. "Which pastry?" "Did Hunter pack those little wolf-shaped ones you liked?" A soft laugh escaped Scarlet, dispelling some of the dream's lingering unease. "Not a pastry, Emma Chase," she clarified, shaking her head. She shared her dream with him, describing Emma's tears and inexplicable distress. "She's been so frightened of Erik," Scarlet explained. "I know he seems harsh, but you vouched for him, so he can't be completely terrible, right?" Roman stroked her hair gently, his touch soothing. "Erik Blackwood is many things, but he wouldn't harm your friend without cause." Despite his reassurance, anxiety still threaded through Scarlet's thoughts. "But Emma's so different from us, Roman. She's never had to deal with rogues or territory disputes or, well, alphas like Erik. She's lived such a sheltered life." The helplessness in her voice betrayed how deeply she empathized with Emma's fear, how much she wished she could protect her friend from the harsh realities of their world. Meanwhile, in the European territories, chaos erupted in Erik Blackwood's villa. The pristine living room had transformed into a makeshift emergency treatment area, with pack healers rushing about with urgent purpose. Emma Chase stood frozen in the doorway, horror etched across her face as she watched Dr. Aris and Dr. Elms work frantically over Eric's prone form. The Alpha's skin had taken on a sickly gray pallor, his breathing labored. "His vitals are dropping," Dr. Elms reported, her experienced hands moving quickly to prepare another dose of emergency herbs. "We need to flush the toxin from his system," Dr. Aris agreed, his voice tight with concentration. Emma's mistake had become terrifyingly clear. In her nervous haste, she had confused Eric's medications. The potent topical paste meant for his silver bullet wound had been given to him orally, while his injury had received a dousing of crushed oral herbs. Leo Vance stood guard outside the room, his posture rigid with tension. His usually playful demeanor had vanished, replaced by deadly seriousness as he glared at Emma. "You're not a saboteur sent by a rival pack, are you?" he demanded, his voice cutting through her shock like a knife. "Did someone put you up to this?" Emma's hands trembled violently as she shook her head, unable to form words. The accusation struck like a physical blow, adding to her already overwhelming guilt and fear. "I didn't. I never," she stammered, but her defense crumbled before it could fully form. "Alpha Blackwood has many enemies," Leo continued, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Wolves who would do anything to eliminate him, including sending a seemingly innocent she-wolf to infiltrate his home." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, spilling over and tracking down her pale cheeks. "It was an accident," she finally managed, her voice breaking. "The bottles looked so similar and I was nervous and—" "Convenient," Leo cut her off, unconvinced. Emma covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Chapter 225, Medication Mishap. "She really didn't mean to do it?" Tristan's voice echoed from somewhere in the room, but I could barely hear him through my own sobs. My hands trembled violently as I tried to explain how I'd managed to mix up 2 bottles of medicine while caring for Erik Blackwood. The bottles had looked so similar, both containing powdered herbs, both with handwritten labels that I'd misread in my nervous haste. I was. My voice cracked as I recalled each fatal step that led to this disaster. First, fishing out the powdered herbs, my hands shaking. Then, fumbling with the dosage measure, spilling some on the counter. Finally, fetching water and mixing it all together, not realizing my devastating error until it was too late. Erik had barely swallowed the mixture before he was doubled over, overwhelmed with nausea and violent vomiting. His reaction had revealed my grave mistake immediately. "This is meant for external application on the silver wound," Dr. Aris had exclaimed in horror, examining the empty bottle I'd used. "Not for ingestion." Now, with the pack healer and Eric's enforcers still in the room, I struggled for words. Nothing seemed adequate to express my remorse. "I really didn't mean to. Sob," I cried, my voice barely holding together. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe properly. Leo Vance's harsh voice cut through my tears. "And now you're crying? Let's see how Alpha Blackwood will deal with you later." The mention that Erik might be in danger pushed my anxiety over the edge. I burst into a fresh fit of sobs, shoulders shaking uncontrollably. "I really didn't mean it, sob," I repeated uselessly, knowing how pathetic I sounded. Leo rolled his eyes dramatically. "It doesn't matter whether you meant it or not. If something happens to Alpha Blackwood, do you think intent will save you?" Panic swelled in my chest, my mind racing as I imagined the worst possibilities. What happened to wolves who accidentally poisoned powerful alphas? I'd been in this world long enough to know that pack justice could be swift and merciless. "But he won't be in trouble, right?" I ventured, my voice small and hopeful. Leo threw up his hands in exasperation. "How should I know? The external wound treatment was ingested. Now Dr. Aris is giving him an antidote purge." My face crumpled further. An antidote purge was serious business, forcing the body to violently expel toxins while simultaneously trying to neutralize them. For an alpha already weakened by a silver wound, it was dangerous and painful. But he vomited almost immediately after taking it, I reasoned timidly, clinging to hope. So maybe not much was absorbed? Leo's lips curled in a dismissive snort. You'd better pray. Nothing happens to him. His cold gaze pierced through me. If something happens to Alpha Blackwood, you'll be skinned and boned alive. I trembled at his words, recognizing the common pack threat. Though I knew it was likely exaggerated, the underlying message was clear. My carelessness could have deadly consequences. I never even wanted to be responsible for him, I whimpered, wrapping my arms around myself. I tried calling for help so many times, but no one came. And now I'm the one who's going to pay for it? My complaints seemed to provoke irritation in both Leo and Tristan. Leo's eyes narrowed dangerously, and I braced myself for another verbal lashing. But before he could unleash his temper, Tristan emerged fully from Erik's room. Enough, stop scaring her, he said, his voice steady and firm. I hadn't realized he'd been listening to my breakdown from inside the room. This rare display of sympathy made me blink in surprise. Leo, however, remained undeterred. I'm just being honest. If Alpha Blackwood is in trouble, she won't escape blame. This harsh prediction turned my body rigid with dread. The thought of facing Erik's wrath, or worse, being responsible for serious harm to him, made me feel physically ill. Tristan scowled, reaching out to smack Leo on the back of the head. Shut up. Haven't you scared her enough? Gathering what little courage I had left, I looked up at Tristan. Tristan, is he all right? My nerves were so frayed that I accidentally called him Leo instead, and both wolves collapsed into laughter at my expense. She called you Leo, Leo guffawed, pointing at Tristan with childish glee. Heat rushed to my cheeks, embarrassment compounding my misery. Great, now I was not only a potential poisoner, but also a confused Will you be scared to death staying by Alpha Blackwood's side? Leo teased, mimicking my worried expression. But beneath the mockery, I caught the implication. Erik was out of danger. My relief was so profound that I nearly collapsed against the wall. As Tristan and Leo finally exited, I lingered in the hallway, my cheeks still streaked with tears and humiliation. I tried to peer inside Erik's room, desperate to see for myself that he was okay. Before I could get a proper look, Dr. Eris and Maliki intercepted me in the doorway. Don't worry, Miss Chase. Alpha Blackwood is fine now, Dr. Eris assured me, his professional demeanor softening slightly at my obvious distress. Maliki, standing at his usual attentive position, suddenly seemed to remember something. Anya, he called to a nearby pack servant, you'll be in charge of preparing Alpha Blackwood's meals from now on. The realization hit me painfully. In Erik's world, I was always viewed as clumsy and inadequate. First, my disastrous cooking. Now, this medication mix-up. I was a series of catastrophes waiting to happen. Left alone in the hallway, I paced restlessly, my anxiety building with each step. Should I check on him? Apologize? Or would that just make things worse? After nearly 30 minutes of internal debate, I finally gathered the nerve to approach Erik's door. My knuckles rapped softly against the wood, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Come in, Erik's deep, impassive voice called from inside. I pushed the door open slowly, stepping hesitantly over the threshold. My hands twisted nervously at the hem of my sweater. Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry. I really didn't mean it, I blurted out immediately, my eyes fixed on the floor. The room was dimly lit, with Erik propped up against several pillows on his bed. He looked paler than usual, but otherwise surprisingly normal for someone who'd just undergone an antidote purge. Come here, he commanded. Don't make me say it again. His tone left no room for resistance. I approached the bed slowly, stopping about a meter away, still overwhelmed by his intimidating presence. Without warning, Erik reached out and pulled me directly into his embrace. I gasped, my body going rigid with shock as I found myself pressed against his chest. His skin was unusually warm, likely a side effect of the antidote, and I could feel his heart beating rapidly beneath my palm. The heat of his body seemed to seep into me, making my own temperature rise in response. Were you worried about me? He asked quietly, his breath warm against my hair. I nodded, unable to form words. My face was probably scarlet by now, and I couldn't bring myself to meet his gaze. Erik tightened his hold slightly, his voice dropping to a murmur. Is this all the courage you have? The intimacy of the moment caught me completely off guard. We had never been this close before, at least not intentionally. My previous accidents with his bath towel and belt buckle didn't count. Those had been mortifying mishaps, not whatever this was. "Mr. Blackwood," I stammered, my voice barely audible as my face turned crimson. Are you hugging me right now?" Chapter 276, Trapped by Suspicion. Erik Blackwood's amber eyes locked with mine, his silence more terrifying than any words could be. I was still trapped in his embrace, my heart hammering against my ribs so violently I was certain he could feel it. "Mr. Blackwood, please," I whispered, attempting to extricate myself from his arms. Instead of releasing me, his hold tightened slightly. His expression remained unreadable as he finally spoke. "Be braver in the future, understand?" I blinked rapidly, confusion washing over me. Be braver? Around him? The very notion seemed absurd. His alpha power alone was enough to make me tremble. How could I possibly be brave when his mere presence made my wolf cower beneath my skin? "Please let me go," I stammered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. To my surprise, he complied immediately, his arms falling away. I scrambled backward, putting a safe distance between us. The sudden loss of his warmth left me oddly disoriented. "I'm not sent by anyone," I blurted out desperately. "I really didn't deliberately give you the wrong medicine." Leo Vance's accusations had planted a terrifying seed in my mind. What if Erik actually believed I was some sort of spy or saboteur? The thought made my blood run cold. "I would never hurt you intentionally," I continued, my voice growing softer with each word. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." Erik remained silent, his calculating gaze following my every movement. I realized with growing dread that everyone around him was potentially dangerous. Even Leo, despite his often foolish appearance, was kept around for his expertise with silver weapons. These weren't just pack wolves, they were Erik's personally selected enforcers. My silence stretched too long, and panic seized me. "I really didn't do it on purpose," I insisted, my voice cracking. "Please believe me." "Scarlet Winter's intelligence has never been high," Erik suddenly remarked, his voice cool and detached. "And being spoiled by Roman Thorn has affected her judgment too." I stared at him in confusion. Why was he bringing up Scarlet now? What did her judgment have to do with my medication mix-up? His penetrating gaze made my heart race faster. Was he actually giving credence to Leo's absurd theory? Did he genuinely believe I was sent to harm him? "I really am not," I insisted, my panic mounting as I noticed the slight outline of what could only be a weapon beneath his clothes. The realization hit me like ice water. My life could end in this room if he decided to reach for it. I had no pack protection, no allies here. If an alpha like Erik Blackwood decided I was a threat, there would be no one to intervene. "Whether it was you or not needs to be investigated," Erik stated firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. My heart plummeted as he continued, "Until this matter is cleared up, you cannot leave my side, not even half a step." This single sentence determined my immediate future, and the implications were devastating. Scarlet was supposed to pick me up tomorrow morning. She was already on the plane, flying here specifically to rescue me from this nightmare. "Mr. Blackwood," I pleaded, desperation choking my words. "I understand your anger and suspicion, but please believe me, I would never try to harm you." "Why should I believe you?" His question was direct, cutting. "Do we have a relationship built on trust?" I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. He was right, we didn't. We were essentially strangers thrown together by circumstance and Scarlet's arrangements. There was no foundation of trust between us. "No," I admitted reluctantly. "But please, I'm begging you to trust me just this once." Erik's expression remained impassive. "Whether you did it intentionally will be investigated." "How long will that take?" I asked, my voice small. "That's uncertain." The flatness of his response crushed what little hope I had left. "Are your pack enforcers efficient?" I ventured, desperately searching for any reassurance that this ordeal might end quickly. "That's also uncertain." I felt tears threatening again, but forced them back. Crying wouldn't help my situation, it would only make me appear weaker in his eyes. Erik checked his watch, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Make some porridge," he instructed. For a moment, I felt a spark of hope. At least he was allowing me to do something useful. But the spark died as quickly as it had appeared when he immediately changed his mind. "No, never mind," "I'll have someone else arrange it," he said dismissively. I could practically hear the unspoken thought. I couldn't be trusted with food preparation after my previous disasters. First, the inedible noodles, now a medication mix-up. I was a walking catastrophe in his eyes. "You may go," he added, his tone making it clear our conversation was over. I left his room, shoulders slumped in defeat. The hallway seemed impossibly long as I made my way back to my own room, each step heavier than the last. Once inside, I immediately tried calling Scarlett. She was my only hope now. Surely she would know what to do. But the call wouldn't connect. Of course, she was on a plane with limited signal thousands of feet above the ground. I sank onto the bed, burying my face in my hands. How had everything gone so horribly wrong? I had come to the European territories to help Scarlett, to support my best friend. Instead, I found myself trapped with a dangerous Alpha, who now suspected me of attempted poisoning. The worst part was knowing that Scarlett was coming to rescue me, but I wouldn't be able to leave with her. Not with Erik's new decree that I couldn't leave his side until the investigation was complete. And who knew how long that would take? Days? Weeks? The uncertainty was almost as terrifying as Erik himself. Third person's POV. On the private jet soaring through the night sky, Scarlett Winters had finally fallen into peaceful sleep after being comforted by Roman Thorne. Her mate gazed down at her for a long moment, a rare tenderness softening his usually hard features. With careful movements, Roman adjusted the blanket around Scarlett, ensuring she was completely covered before rising quietly. He left the rest area, moving toward the main cabin, where Aiden Walsh sat sullenly nursing a glass of red wine. The healer's expression soured further when he spotted Roman. With childish defiance, Aiden turned away, making a show of ignoring the Alpha's approach. Roman sat across from him without acknowledging the petulant display. He poured himself a glass of wine, his movements unhurried and deliberate. "You're still sending me to that frozen wasteland." Aiden finally broke the silence, unable to contain himself any longer. His lips formed a pronounced pout as he swirled the wine in his glass. Roman took a measured sip before responding. "You give me no choice." "That's unfair," Aiden protested, setting his glass down with more force than necessary. "How was I supposed to suspect pregnancy? You've always taken such good care of her health." Roman's ice-blue eyes regarded Aiden coolly. For someone with your supposed reputation, missing such an obvious diagnosis is concerning. Aiden bristled at the implication. "Are you questioning my skills as a healer?" "I'm not questioning them," Roman replied calmly. "I'm stating outright that you truly aren't capable." The blunt assessment hit Aiden like a physical blow. He sputtered indignantly. That's completely unjustified. I'm not specialized in maternal healing. If anyone should have noticed, it should have been her friend, Emma." Roman's expression didn't change. As a pack healer from a line of healers, you should understand basic wolf anatomy. Or was your reputation vastly overstated? The accusation hung in the air between them, sharp as a blade. Aiden's face flushed with anger and humiliation. "You're just looking for an excuse," he accused, his voice rising slightly. "You've wanted to send me to the Frostfang Wastes all along, claiming you need me there for some important pack business." Roman didn't deny the accusation. He simply took another sip of his wine, his silence more damning than any rebuttal could have been. Aiden realized Roman was just looking for an excuse to send him to the Frostfang Wastes, falsely claiming they needed him there. Chapter 277, A Mother's Desperation and a Daughter's Unforgiving Heart. The pack detention facility was cold and unwelcoming, especially at this late hour. The corridor lights flickered eerily as I was led to Sarah's cell. My heart was heavy, weighed down by the events of the past few days. I'd barely managed to secure this visit through a territory guard who still respected our family name enough to bend the rules. When the cell door opened, I saw my mother sitting on a narrow bed. Her eyes lit up momentarily at the sight of me. "Daniel," she exclaimed, rising shakily to her feet. "You came." The relief in her voice was palpable, but it quickly morphed into concern as she took in my appearance. I knew I looked terrible, my hand still in a cast, bruises marring my face from my recent fights. "What happened to you?" she gasped, rushing forward to examine me. "Your hand and these bruises." I tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "It's nothing, Mother. I'm fine." She grabbed my uninjured hand with both of hers. Her fingers felt thin and brittle against mine. It was shocking how much weight she'd lost in such a short time. "I've been so worried," she whispered. "With everything falling apart, I feared for you." I squeezed her hand gently. "I'm managing." Her expression suddenly darkened, eyes narrowing with hatred. "This is all because of Grace. That ungrateful little snake." The venom in her voice was startling, even to me. "After everything I did for her, everything I gave her." "Mother? She betrayed us," Sarah continued, her voice rising with emotion. "Used our pack resources, manipulated us all, and for what? To save her own miserable life while destroying ours?" I couldn't argue with her. After discovering Grace's deception with the pack finances, I shared her sentiments entirely. "Cast that treacherous Omega Grace Winter out of our pack," Sarah demanded, her eyes flashing. "Make her leave our territory immediately." "I already have," I admitted, recalling how I'd thrown Grace's belongings out the window. "She's gone." A cold smile of satisfaction crossed Sarah's face. "Good. And all her things? The furs, the jewelry, the pack vehicles I allowed her to use? She doesn't deserve a single luxury." "She didn't manage to take much," I assured her, though I omitted that this was less due to my effectiveness and more because our pack assets had dwindled so dramatically. Sarah nodded, leaning back slightly. "Whatever remains should go to our real daughter, to Scarlet." Her voice softened at the name, filled with a complex mixture of emotions. The mention of Scarlet made my stomach clench painfully. I remained silent, unsure how to approach this subject. Sarah must have sensed my hesitation, because anxiety crept into her expression. "I've made terrible mistakes, Daniel. The way I treated Scarlet, favoring Grace." She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. "I let a rogue's daughter take her place. I contributed to destroying our pack." Her fingers dug into my arm with surprising strength. "But she's still my daughter, my flesh and blood. I carried her for 9 months, survived that rogue attack that caused all this. She can't just abandon me now." I watched as hope flickered across her face, desperately searching for reassurance. "You've seen her, haven't you?" Sarah pressed, her voice brittle with desperation. Did she say anything about me, about helping us?" I remained silent, unable to meet her gaze. How could I tell her that Scarlet had thoroughly rejected us? That her hatred ran so deep she'd actively contributed to our downfall? "Daniel?" Sarah's voice turned pleading. "Tell me." I took a deep breath. "Mother, I think we need to accept that Scarlet doesn't consider herself part of our family, not truly." Her face crumpled. "What do you mean? Of course she is. I'm her mother." "By blood, yes," I said carefully. "But she feels no connection to us. She sees herself as part of the Thorn Pack, and she has no mercy for the Winter Pack despite our biological ties." Sarah stared at me in disbelief, then suddenly lurched to her feet. "No, that's not possible. I'm her mother." Her voice rose to a hysterical pitch. "I carried her, suffered for her. How can she treat me like this?" She began pacing the small cell, her movements jerky and desperate. "I've repented. I wouldn't favor Grace anymore. Doesn't that mean anything to her?" I watched helplessly as she spiraled further into distress. Her face was flushed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And what about your father?" she asked suddenly, stopping to face me. "What about Marcus? Surely he wouldn't abandon me too?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I felt my breathing grow labored as I struggled to maintain my composure. "Father is preoccupied," I said finally, the words bitter on my tongue. "Jennifer Moore and their twin pups have his full attention now. He's directed most of our remaining resources to them." Sarah sank back onto the bed, her expression vacant. "So this is it then, our pack is truly finished." "I'm very sorry, Mother," I whispered, feeling utterly helpless. "The Winter Pack is falling apart, and it's not just Grace's betrayal, it's Scarlet's retaliation, too." Sarah didn't respond. She simply stared at the wall, tears silently tracking down her hollow cheeks. Scarlet's P.O. The gentle hum of the jet engines had been my constant companion through the night, and despite sleeping fitfully, I felt drained as we began our descent. Roman had tried to coax me into eating some light venison broth earlier, but the persistent nausea made it impossible to keep anything down. "We're almost home, little wolf," Roman murmured, his hand warm against my cheek. I nodded weakly, leaning into his touch. The possibility that I might be carrying our pup still hadn't fully registered. It felt surreal, frightening and wonderful all at once. By the time we touched down at 10 a.m., I was barely able to stand. Roman took one look at me and scooped me into his arms without hesitation. "Roman, I can walk," I protested weakly, though secretly grateful for his strength. He ignored my objection, carrying me effortlessly down the jet's steps. "You'll see the pack healers as soon as we reach the main house," he declared, his tone brooking no argument. The mention of healers brought a small smile to my lips. I remembered how the healing wing at the Thornpack main house had been specifically expanded for me after my adoption. When I'd fallen ill as a young pup, reacting badly to the sense of a neutral territory clinic, Roman had insisted to his father that I needed special care. Alpha Liam had immediately established a state-of-the-art healing facility within our own territory, staffed with specialists in young shifter ailments. It had evolved over the years, adding experts in rare conditions and trauma treatment, but had always remained my safe haven. Behind us, Aiden Walsh followed, muttering under his breath about wasted resources and special treatment. All this time, a fully equipped healing wing just sitting there, and now it finally gets proper use, he grumbled acidly. Must be nice to have an entire medical facility at your personal disposal. Despite my weakened state, I turned my head to look at him from the safety of Roman's arms. "You'd better stop talking, or your assignment in the Frostfang Wastes might be extended." At the word extended, Aiden's mouth snapped shut, his eyes widening with alarm. The blessed silence that followed was almost worth the nausea. Roman's lips twitched with amusement as he carried me toward the waiting pack vehicles. His protective hold tightened slightly, and through our mate bond, I felt his fierce determination to ensure my well-being, and potentially that of our unborn pup. "The healers are already preparing for your arrival," he informed me, his voice low and intimate. "Nothing but the best for you, little wolf." As we settled into the back of the luxurious pack vehicle, I rested my head against Roman's shoulder, feeling an odd mix of vulnerability and security. After everything we'd endured in the Northern Territories, returning to the Eastern Territories felt like coming up for air after nearly drowning. I closed my eyes, trying not to think about Emma still trapped with Erik Blackwood or Hazel's situation with Connor Reynolds. For now, I needed to focus on my own health and the tiny life that might be growing inside me. "Rest," Roman whispered, kissing my forehead. "You're home now." Behind us, I heard Aiden mutter something else under his breath, but true to his self-preservation instincts, he kept it quiet enough that I couldn't make out the words. The mention of an extended stay in the Frostfang Wastes had proven to be an effective deterrent. As the vehicle pulled away from the airport, carrying us toward the Thornpack's main house, I finally allowed myself to relax in Roman's protective embrace, knowing that whatever challenges awaited us, we would face them together, perhaps now as a family of 3. Chapter 278, Family Reunion at the Airfield. The Eastern Territories airfield stretched before us as our convoy pulled to a stop. After everything we'd been through in the Northern Territories, being back in familiar territory felt surreal. Roman carried me carefully from the car, still insisting I shouldn't walk despite my protests. "I see them," Roman murmured against my hair. Looking up, I spotted 2 familiar figures waiting by the airfield entrance. The Thornpack's head steward, Alaric, stood tall and proper as always, but it was the silver blonde hair of the figure beside him that made my heart leap. Natalie, my sister-in-law, Roman's cousin who I'd grown up with as a sister. 3 years felt like an eternity since I'd seen her last. "Let me down," I whispered urgently to Roman, squirming in his arms. "Please, I can stand." Roman reluctantly set me on my feet but kept a supportive arm around my waist. I took a wobbly step forward, then another, trying to appear stronger than I felt. Natalie's eyes locked with mine across the distance. There was no warmth of reunion in them, only fierce, blazing anger. I swallowed hard. "Natalie?" I whispered, suddenly feeling small and guilty. She marched toward me, her stride purposeful and intimidating. Even in her anger, she moved with the natural grace that had always made me envious. The Thorne family's signature blue eyes, so like Roman's, flashed dangerously. "You," she hissed, stopping just short of me. I instinctively shrank back against Roman, clinging to his arm. Natalie's glare only intensified. "Look at you," she scoffed, looking me up and down. "Still so small. I thought you might have grown in these past years, but you're practically the same size." "I have grown," I protested weakly. "I'm taller now." Natalie rolled her eyes dramatically. "You still only reach his heart," she pointed out, gesturing to Roman. "Pathetic." Before I could respond, she grabbed my wrist and yanked me forward, pulling me away from Roman's protective embrace. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You have a lot of explaining to do, Scarlet Winters," she growled. "What were you thinking, leaving the Eastern Territories like that? You didn't even say goodbye." I dropped my gaze to the ground, shame washing over me. "I'm sorry, Natalie. You just left when Darian Morrison told you to?" she interrupted, her voice rising with indignation. "Did you think the Thorn Pack was made of glass? At the very least, you still had your pack elders." The mention of Darian Morrison sent a chill through me. His threats against Luna Catherine had been so convincing, so terrifying. "I didn't have a choice," I said softly. "What exactly did he say to you?" Natalie demanded, her eyes narrowing. "I want to know every word. I'll confront him myself." My eyes widened in alarm. "You've seen him?" "This morning," she confirmed with a sharp nod. "I rushed back from my assignment in the European neutral zone the moment I heard he'd returned to the European territories." "You confronted him?" I whispered, horrified at the thought of Natalie facing Darian alone. Natalie's grip tightened on my wrist painfully. "Someone had to, since you decided to run away instead of standing your ground." I winced at both her words and her grip. "Natalie, please." "Let her go." Roman's voice cut through our exchange, deep and commanding. Natalie turned to her cousin, not releasing me. "She needs to be disciplined, Roman. 3 years. 3 years she's been gone." I said, "Let her go." Roman's tone dropped even lower, a hint of his alpha power threading through it. Natalie stubbornly maintained her grip. "She needs my training again. Look how weak she's become." The thought of Natalie's infamous training made me tremble. Those practice sessions had been brutal when we were younger. Now, with her anger and 3 years of pent-up resentment fueling her. "I'm Roman's mate now, Natalie," I blurted out desperately. The words landed like a bomb. Silence fell over our entire group. Even the airfield staff seemed to freeze in place. Natalie's grip slackened in shock, allowing me to pull my wrist free. The tense silence was broken by Aiden Walsh's sudden burst of laughter. "Ha ha ha!" he cackled, stepping forward with a wide grin. "Natalie, little Scarlet is Roman's mate now." "Do you know what that means?" He paused dramatically, clearly enjoying the moment before continuing. "The Alpha's mate is like the Pack's mother. She's practically Luna Catherine's successor in a way." If looks could kill, Aiden would have dropped dead on the spot. Natalie's face drained of all color, then rapidly flushed with fury. Though she already knew about our relationship, Aiden's audacious comparison apparently crossed a line. "I'll show you who's whose mother," Natalie snarled, pivoting suddenly and launching a powerful kick at Aiden. He dodged with surprising agility, causing her foot to connect instead with his medical satchel. The bag went sailing through the air, its contents spilling across the tarmac, precious moon-blessed herbs, bandages, and vials scattering in the wind. Alpha Erik cleared his throat uncomfortably as airfield ground crew and other pack members stared at the unfolding drama. One by one, they began to edge away, clearly not wanting to get caught in the crossfire. "My supplies!" Aiden howled, dropping to his knees to gather his scattered possessions. He shot Natalie a venomous glare. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to get these herbs?" Natalie crossed her arms, unmoved by his distress. "That's nothing compared to what I'll do to you next." Aiden scrambled to his feet, clutching his partially refilled satchel. "Natalie, you fierce she-wolf, you should just pack off to the Frostfang Wastes with my sister Hazel. You're both too much trouble." The mention of Hazel Walsh made Natalie's eyes narrow dangerously. "Your sister? Don't even get me started on Hazel Walsh." "What did Hazel ever do to you?" Aiden demanded. Natalie took a threatening step toward him. "She ran off after misleading me. You can answer for her actions." "What? Don't even think about it." Aiden backed away, protectively clutching his satchel to his chest. Their argument escalated rapidly, with Natalie chasing Aiden around the tarmac. He dodged behind vehicles and equipment, using whatever obstacles he could find to keep her at bay. I felt Roman's warm hand slip into mine. "Let's go home," he murmured against my ear. Without waiting for my response, he gently pulled me toward one of the waiting SUVs. I followed willingly, glancing back over my shoulder at the chaotic scene. "Hey, where are you going?" Natalie called after us, momentarily pausing her pursuit of Aiden. "Scarlett, Roman, wait!" Aiden shouted, seizing the opportunity to put more distance between himself and Natalie. Roman ignored them both, helping me into the vehicle before sliding in beside me. The door closed with a solid thunk, muffling their continued protests. The convoy of Thornpack vehicles pulled away from the airfield, leaving the bickering pair behind. I couldn't help but smile slightly at their antics. Some things never changed. Alaric, who had quietly entered the SUV before us, reached into a small cooler and withdrew a sleek insulated flask. He handed it to me with a respectful nod. "Luna Catherine prepared this for you, knowing your appetite has been poor lately," he explained. "It's a special broth." My throat tightened with emotion. Luna Catherine had always known exactly what I needed, even when I didn't know myself. "Is Luna Catherine at the main house?" I asked hopefully. Alaric shook his head. "She left early for pack duties. She'll return in the evening." His expression softened slightly. "She said to tell you to stay within the Thornpack compound and not wander off." The familiar phrase transported me back to my childhood. Luna Catherine would say those exact words before attending to pack matters, always adding that other young pack members could visit me at the Alpha's residence instead. "She hasn't changed at all," I whispered, a mixture of fondness and nostalgia washing over me. "The protection was necessary," Alaric explained, his voice gentle but serious. "Both Luna Catherine's lineage and the Thornpack's status in the Eastern Territories attract attention from rival packs and organizations." I nodded, understanding all too well. Even after I'd made friends with other young wolves in the pack, I hadn't been allowed to roam freely outside the most secure areas. Instead, my friends would come to visit me at the Alpha's residence under the watchful eyes of pack guards. Roman took the flask from my hands, twisting it open. Immediately, the familiar aroma of healing herbs and rich broth wafted through the SUV, a scent I recognized from countless times Luna Catherine had nursed me through illness or injury. Chapter 279, Homeward Broth and Apprehensions. 3 years felt like an eternity when I was away from the Eastern Territories. Every single day, I'd wake up in the Northern Territories feeling the hollow ache of missing my true home. Missing Roman. Missing Luna Catherine. Missing Natalie despite her fierce training methods. I'd thrown myself into my healing work, treating patients until my fingers cramped and my eyes burned with exhaustion. It was the only way to numb the loneliness, to make the days pass without drowning in my own thoughts. But now, sitting in the Thornpack SUV with the scent of Luna Catherine's special broth filling my senses, those 3 long years suddenly compressed into what felt like a fleeting moment. "Would you like some?" Roman asked gently, holding the insulated flask Alaric had given us. I nodded, taking the container despite the odd changes in my food preferences lately. This wasn't just any broth. This was Luna Catherine's specialty, prepared with the care and knowledge she'd perfected over decades. The memory of her making it came to me vividly. Luna Catherine always insisted on preparing nourishing broths for her children personally, no matter how packed her schedule was with pack affairs. When I first arrived, as a traumatized pup, barely speaking and dangerously underweight, she would sit with me for hours, scoff patiently feeding me 1 spoonful at a time. "You need to grow strong," she'd murmur, her voice soft but firm. "Just 1 more spoonful for me." She'd adapted traditional Thornpack recipes, experimenting until she found the perfect blend of herbs and ingredients that would nourish the frightened little she-wolf she'd taken in as her own. I lifted the flask to my lips and took a sip. The familiar taste washed over my tongue, rich, savory, with the perfect balance of healing herbs that didn't overwhelm the natural flavors. Delicious," I murmured. "It still tastes the same." The thought that Luna Catherine had risen early to prepare this specifically for me, knowing my appetite had been poor lately, made my throat tighten painfully. Warmth stung my eyes, and I felt the tears welling up. I looked at Roman, unable to voice my question through the sudden knot in my throat. How did she know? His blue eyes softened as he understood my unspoken question. Aiden Walsh sent word back about your condition, he explained, his voice gentle. I blinked in surprise. Aiden had reported my condition to Luna Catherine? I wondered what exactly he'd told her. For a supposedly renowned healer, he hadn't even noticed I might be pregnant. How had such an oblivious wolf become famous in the first place? I drank the broth steadily, savoring each mouthful until the flask was empty. I handed it back to Alaric, who smiled with satisfaction from his seat in the front of the vehicle. I'm glad to see you've matured during your time away, Miss Winters, Alaric commented. You seem more serene now. I wasn't sure if serene was the right word for everything I was feeling, but I appreciated his kind observation. Can we visit Erik Blackwood's villa first, as we discussed? I asked Roman, turning to face him. To pick up Emma. Roman checked his watch, considering. We can, but I need to handle some urgent pack business first. He leaned forward slightly, addressing Alaric. Take her to Eric's villa. I'll meet you both at the main house later. Alaric nodded his understanding. Bring Emma Chase straight to the Thornpack main house afterward, Roman instructed me, his tone gentle, but leaving no room for deviation. I nodded, understanding his concern. After everything we'd been through, he wanted me safely within Pack territory as soon as possible. At a secure intersection, our convoy split. Roman transferred to another armored SUV, his own team of enforcers following close behind. 3 Thornpack vehicles continued escorting me toward Eric's villa in the European territories. I gazed out the window during the drive, my thoughts drifting to Emma. I hoped she was all right. From our phone conversations, she seemed terrified of Erik Blackwood. I couldn't help feeling guilty for leaving her with him, even though Roman had assured me Erik would keep her safe. The morning light filtered through the windows of Erik Blackwood's villa, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Emma Chase stood in the kitchen area, her trembling hands attempting to organize a set of healing herbs. Her eyes were red-rimmed from a night spent tossing and turning, reliving the medication disaster over and over in her mind. Every sound made her jump. A door closing, a voice in the hallway, the creak of floorboards. She kept expecting Erik Blackwood to appear and announce her punishment for nearly poisoning him. The sudden sound of vehicles approaching outside made her freeze. Footsteps echoed in the entryway, followed by a familiar voice calling her name. Emma? Emma's head snapped up, her heart leaping with hope. Scarlet? She whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Then Scarlet was there, standing in the doorway, concern etched across her face. The sight of her friend, her savior, broke the fragile composure Emma had been clinging to all morning. Scarlet! She cried, tears immediately flooding her eyes as she rushed forward. Scarlet met her halfway, wrapping her arms around Emma's shaking form. What's wrong? Why are you crying? Emma couldn't answer immediately, her relief too overwhelming. After all the mishaps with Erik Blackwood, the endless, mortifying incidents that seemed to multiply daily, seeing Scarlet felt like finding water in a desert. You finally came, Emma managed between sobs. I almost didn't think I'd see today's sun. Leaning against the wall in the hallway, Leo Vance had been waiting for news from Erik. Hearing Emma's dramatic declaration, his mouth twitched in disbelief. Nothing truly life-threatening had happened to her last night, he thought privately. The Alpha's enforcers had only spoken sternly to her after the medication mix-up. Yet she claimed she almost couldn't see today's sun? She-Wolf's understanding of danger seemed somewhat exaggerated. He let out an internal sigh. He hadn't planned on ever needing to understand a she-wolf's perspective anyway. He almost felt sorry for his Alpha being stuck with someone so timid. Scarlet's POV. I held Emma tightly, patting her back as her tears soaked into my shoulder. It's okay now. It's okay, I soothed, feeling terrible about how frightened she was. Honestly, Erik Blackwood should learn to be gentler with she-wolves, or he'd never find a mate. He wasn't usually this terrifying. When he was with Roman, he seemed quite reasonable, even joining our conversations sometimes. What had happened to make Emma so thoroughly scared? Perhaps the intensity of the situations she'd experienced while under Erik's protection had been too much for her. Emma had always lived a relatively sheltered life in the Northern Territories, trained as a healer rather than a fighter. She wasn't prepared for the harsh realities of alpha politics and danger. Emma continued sobbing, her small shoulders trembling beneath my hands. She looked utterly pitiful, reminding me of a drenched kitten. "It's all over, forget it, okay?" I said, trying to sound reassuring. Emma pulled back suddenly, her tear-streaked face showing clear disagreement. "It's not over, not at all. I almost died." She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a choked whisper. "And it wasn't just dangerous for me. I almost killed Erik Blackwood last night." I stared at her, stunned. Gently, I pushed her away slightly so I could see her face clearly. "What did you say?" I couldn't believe it, not because I thought Emma was capable of malice, but because I genuinely doubted she possessed the ability to seriously harm an alpha as powerful as Erik Blackwood. In our world, anyone truly capable of killing Erik Blackwood probably hadn't been born yet. Emma sniffled, her voice still laced with residual fear. "I almost took Eric's life last night, Scarlett. I was so scared." She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "Why am I so stupid? I wasn't like this in the Northern Territories before. Why do I always cause such terrible trouble when he's around?" She began recounting her recent accidents, the cooking disasters, the embarrassing nosebleeds, and now the medication mix-up, her voice growing increasingly distraught until she broke down crying again before she could finish. I could only look at her, completely dumbfounded. What exactly had happened during her stay with Erik Blackwood? Chapter 280, Desperate Pleading. I stared at Emma in utter disbelief. Her tear-streaked face and trembling lips told me something terrible had happened, but I hadn't expected this level of disaster. She stood before me, a complete wreck, her eyes red and puffy from what must have been hours of crying. "You did what?" I asked again, needing confirmation that I hadn't misheard her initial confession. Emma hiccuped through another sob, her shoulders shaking violently. This wasn't just her usual nervousness around Erik Blackwood. This was genuine terror. "Come on, stop crying and explain clearly what's going on," I urged, grabbing her shoulders gently but firmly. "I can't help if I don't understand." She took several deep, shuddering breaths before she managed to speak coherently. I nearly killed Erik Blackwood," she whispered, her voice breaking on the Alpha's name. The admission hung in the air between us. I felt my jaw slacken. "How?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even and non-judgmental, though my mind was racing with possibilities. Emma wiped her nose with her sleeve, looking utterly miserable. "I was supposed to change his silver wound dressing and give him healing herbs. He's been taking these moon-blessed herbs to heal internally." I nodded. That made sense. Silver wounds needed both external and internal treatment. "But I got confused," Emma continued, her voice small. "I mixed up the bottles, the topical paste for his silver wound. I gave it to him to drink instead of the oral healing herbs." My eyes widened. "You fed him external wound paste?" She nodded miserably. "It has quite strong properties, very dangerous if ingested." I was momentarily speechless. This wasn't just a minor mistake. It was sheer foolishness. Any healer, even an apprentice, should know better than to confuse internal and external treatments. "He started vomiting almost immediately," Emma continued, the memory clearly painful. "Dr. Aris had to give him an antidote purge right away. It was horrible, Scarlett. He could have died because of me." She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Am I really that foolish?" I hesitated, not wanting to kick her when she was so obviously down. But my silent hesitation was answer enough, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "What happened afterward?" I asked gently. "Was there any consequence?" "No, not really," she admitted. "He recovered quickly, but I was terrified the whole time. His enforcers, especially Leo Vance, almost wanted to skin me alive. I couldn't blame them. If it were me, I'd want to skin you alive too," I said bluntly. What should have been a simple silver wound recovery had nearly turned into a life-threatening situation because of Emma's carelessness. Roman would have been furious if anything had happened to his ally under such circumstances. Emma looked at me with desperate, pleading eyes. "What now? Can you take me away?" There was something about her expression, a mixture of hope and fear, that made me suspect there was more to the story than she was telling me. "Is there something you're not telling me?" I questioned, narrowing my eyes slightly. "No," she responded too quickly, avoiding my gaze. "Nothing else." Her denial was so transparent it was almost painful to watch. Emma had never been a good liar. Whatever she was hiding, it was clearly significant enough to make her uncomfortable. "Where is he?" I asked, deciding not to press her further for now. "In his room," she replied, lifting her chin toward the staircase. "Let's go together then," I suggested, already moving toward the stairs. It wouldn't be proper for me to enter an Alpha's private chambers alone, especially not an unallied one. Roman definitely wouldn't approve. To my surprise, Emma immediately backed away, shaking her head vigorously. "You go," she insisted, her voice tinged with fresh panic. "What? Why?" I asked, confused by her sudden reluctance. "Leo Vance is also there," she explained, wringing her hands nervously. "That foolish Omega. He has such a sharp tongue, and I can't stand him." I could understand that. Leo Vance had a reputation for being blunt to the point of cruelty sometimes. If he'd been berating Emma over her medication mix-up, no wonder she was so distressed. "All right," I conceded. "If others are present, I'll speak to Erik alone. Pack your things, and we'll leave when I return." Emma's shoulders slumped with relief. "I don't have anything to pack. My mother sent me here so abruptly I didn't bring much." Her voice held a note of bitterness that surprised me. Emma rarely complained about her family's situation. "She was so insistent about sending me to the European territories for safety," Emma continued, making air quotes around the word. "And now look at me. My mother and Jason Reed are missing. I'm stuck here with rival packs or enemies possibly waiting for me, and I've nearly killed an Alpha with my incompetence." I patted her shoulder sympathetically. "Just wait here. I'll handle this." Leaving Emma in the living room, I climbed the stairs toward Erik Blackwood's chambers. The hallway was quiet, but I could hear muffled voices from behind his door. Taking a deep breath, I knocked firmly. "Erik, are you available?" I called, keeping my voice clear and composed. There was a brief silence, followed by some shuffling sounds. Then Leo Vance's voice called back, "Come in, little princess." I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Erik's spacious room was dominated by a large desk where he sat reviewing something on a packed data slate. Leo Vance stood beside him, looking slightly annoyed at being interrupted. "Little princess," Leo greeted me with a respectful nod. I hadn't heard that title, directed at me with such familiarity, in quite a while. It made me feel that I had truly returned to a place where Roman's influence was recognized, even in the European territories with his ally. Erik looked up, and I noticed immediately how pale his complexion was. Emma's medication error had clearly affected him more than she'd let on. "Scarlet," Erik acknowledged, adjusting his robe slightly. There was a tacit understanding among Alphas allied with Roman's circle to maintain a certain decorum in front of me, his mate. "Erik," I replied with a respectful dip of my head, "I hope you're feeling better." His lips twitched slightly. "Word travels fast." "Emma told me what happened," I explained. "She's quite distraught about it." Erik's expression revealed nothing of his thoughts on the matter. He simply gestured for me to continue. Getting straight to the point, I stated, "I'm here to take Emma." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees instantly. Leo Vance's expression shifted from neutral to alarmed, and Erik's gaze became sharper, more focused. I glanced between them, suddenly uncertain. "I'll be taking her away then?" Erik's POV. I had been engrossed in reviewing security footage on my data slate when Scarlet Winters arrived. Though I heard Leo Vance announcing her presence, I deliberately didn't look up immediately, finishing my analysis of the suspicious figure captured on our perimeter sensors last night. Only after Leo called my name twice did I acknowledge him with a slight nod, instructing, "Let her in." I adjusted my robe out of respect, not for Scarlet herself, but for what she represented. Roman Thorne's mate commanded a certain level of propriety, even in my own territory. Leo greeted her as Little Princess, the familiar title used within Roman's inner circle. I watched as Scarlet's posture subtly changed, a hint of confidence returning to her bearing. Interesting how quickly she reacted to that recognition of status. Her eyes immediately assessed my condition, observant as expected of Roman's chosen mate. "Erik," she greeted me with appropriate respect. "I hope you're feeling better." I allowed a slight twitch of my lips, acknowledging her concern without revealing much. "Word travels fast." "Emma told me what happened," she explained. "She's quite distraught about it." Of course she was. The little healer had been practically hysterical since the incident. Her fear was almost incomprehensible. I had survived far worse than a mistaken medication. Scarlett didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm here to take Emma." I kept my expression neutral, though her directness was unexpected. The room temperature seemed to drop as Leo tensed beside me, understanding the implications better than Scarlett herself apparently did. She glanced between us, suddenly uncertain. "I'll be taking her away then?"